Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here as always to talk about stuff. This week on the show, we have a packed episode. Our two main topics, we are going to review Uncharted, The Lost Legacy from Naughty Dog. Quick spoiler-free thoughts on that in a second. And we're going to review the latest episode of Twin Peaks, Part 16, the penultimate week of the show, and one of the most magnificent episodes of TV I've ever seen in my life.
It is, yeah. It's really fucking good.
We will give reviews of both of those in depth. We're going to talk about some other little pieces of stuff, some news. I've played a little bit of Mario plus Rabbids, so I'll give a review forthcoming on that, but I've played enough to give you some thoughts.
I've inverted my Y-axis on Yakuza Kiwami.
Okay.
So, you know, I've started in on that, first step of playing that game.
Yep. So more game reviews coming next week, and it's a pell-mell marathon from here to the end of the year because there's so much crazy stuff coming down the pike.
Yeah.
It's really quick. I loved Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. What did you think?
I thought it was fantastic. Yeah,
it's so good.
If you like Uncharted at all, like, absolutely pick it up. Don't think that it's like some sort of like minuscule, diminished version of Uncharted because it's $40. Like, it is. I mean, it basically, my like pitch for the game and my response to it is like they made an Uncharted 1, 2, 3 style Uncharted game with the Uncharted 4 engine and mechanics and everything.
It's a great way to look at it, even in terms of length and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, it is. It's one of the best Uncharted games. Yeah. It's outstanding. It's Naughty Dog. This is the 10-year anniversary of Uncharted, and what a ride that has been. The run of games they have made in those 10 years, legendary.
Yeah, absolutely outstanding.
Because I have a folder on my PS4 home screen that is all the Naughty Dog games, and now I also have a Jak and Daxter game in there because it was a pre-order bonus for The Lost Legacy.
There you go.
And it's like this lineup of games: Uncharted 1, 2, 3, 4, The Lost Legacy, and The Last of Us. That's just almost unparalleled if you take any other studio in a 10-year time period.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, anyway, I'm so excited to talk about all of that. Before we get into the stuff and the housekeeping, just a quick word. I don't know if we have any listeners in Texas. If we do, I don't expect you to be listening to this week, depending on where in Texas you live. But if you catch up with it, I hope you're okay. If you're not, I hope you get the assistance you need.
Yeah.
If you want to help out, you can always donate to the Red Cross and things like that. But yeah, it's been sad to see some of the images out of there, and also inspiring to see all the people doing cool stuff like bringing their own boats out to rescue people in Houston. But yeah, it's a hell of a thing to see. The last time I think something like this happened in our lifetimes was Katrina, which was 11 years ago.
Something of this, a hurricane of this scale.
Yeah. So anyway, just best wishes to people in that area. Yeah. Let's go ahead and do some quick housekeeping.
All right.
So, we have on our YouTube channel this week, Halo Episode 7 went up Monday, and that was the library.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched any episode of our Halo Let's Play, I would recommend Episode 7 because the library is a legendary level of Halo, and I thought it turned into one of our best episodes. It's not as long as as you would think, because we played that level on normal.
Yes, that's when we bumped the difficulty down. It would have been a very different episode if we had played that on Heroic.
Yes, so that's about a 40-minute episode, and I think one of the funniest. Have you watched that one yet, Sean?
No, I haven't had the opportunity yet.
You need to, because there's some surprises in there for you specifically.
Okay,
we joke a lot on the Halo series about the novelization of Halo 1, Halo the Flood.
By William C. Dietz. Billy Dietz. I know him.
It turned into a big running joke in the second half of the series, and in Episode 7 in particular, you kept referencing parts from the book, so I downloaded the audiobook and the ebook, and there are excerpts in this episode.
Fantastic.
That I laughed my ass off putting together because the writing is so bad.
It's a hell of a thing. It's a hell of a book.
So
I don't call it the worst novel I've ever read for no reason.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about our Halo series is that you will learn a lot. Also, like if you are a casual fan of Halo, even a big fan, I think we had a lot of stuff to give and little pieces of info in addition to just having fun with it. So that series will be finishing up for the public next week. Of course, if you join our Patreon, you can watch all of it right now. That's a $10 a month thing on Patreon. And we are also, next Monday, September 4th, hopefully, we've had some technical difficulties, we're going to have another batch of videos going up. This will not be the next main series of videos, which is going to be Mario 64. Those begin on Patreon Monday, September 11th. But in between the two series, we're going to have a little two-parter for you.
Yeah.
And I think we can announce it's going to be in the game Hitman,
yes,
which we love.
The best game of 2016.
And so we just want to tell you that is coming, and those will be a lot of fun. We actually... I might release these at some point, but we did a few weeks ago try recording these so we would have them ready ahead of time, and there was an issue with the PS4 where we did not have sound for the game, so we just have game visuals and our narration. Again, I might cut them together because particularly Sean's episode is really funny and is an interesting, like, almost strategy guide for a tough...
Yeah, it was a tough escalation mission we did, and I felt like we came out really well by the end.
Did.
I was very proud of the solution we came up for at the end of that episode.
So maybe I'll make those a Patreon exclusive at some point, just as a little bonus, because they're going to be a little rough, because as I said, you wouldn't hear any game audio, which is eerie.
Yeah, it's a very unsettling kind of effect.
So we're going to re-record and do something different in Hitman, and that actually transitions us into our stuff for the week, because my first piece of stuff is that while kind of... Because the last two big game releases have been Sonic Mania and then Uncharted The Lost Legacy, which are both pretty quick games to get through, even though I've played Sonic Mania to completion like 3 times now. So I've been, on the side a lot, I've been playing Hitman on PS4, in part because we were doing those Let's Plays and I just got into it and I didn't want to be like completely unpolished playing it on camera. And I went through and I got level 20 mastery on all 6 maps in Hitman Season 1. And I have to say, that is a fun way to play that game.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Look at the challenges, look at the opportunities, and just go through it. And they've also made some quality of life improvements to the game, I think, with the full Season 1 release earlier this year. Where, like, one update is you live longer when you are getting shot at, which is nice. It allows you to kind of fuck around with the game a little more.
And because the thing they did is they released a pro difficulty mode at the same time, so that if you want to have, like, the more intense, like, you get shot, like, 3 times in your dead experience, that is still in the game. But yeah, they sort of, like, made the normal difficulty more accessible. And I think it opens up a wider range of strategies that you can use, honestly, is the kind of like the effect it feels like it has to me.
This is why difficulty levels are good.
Yeah.
They make everyone happy, right?
Exactly.
And then the other thing they did is you used to have to get the points for a challenge, you had to like clear the mission and watch the last screen and see the XP roll in.
For some of the challenges, not for all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now it's like for everything, it just goes to your account and like you don't have to just finish the challenge for every one of them. So it made it a little easier to get a lot of those challenge points. But I just finished up Hokkaido today. That was the last one I had to do. Yeah. And I actually managed to do that one, Silent Assassin suit only.
There you go. So I'm not sure if I've gone through that map that way yet.
Yeah, because I usually cannot manage to do them that way. That one has a good strategy for it. And that is a fun game. And boy, if you're ever wondering, how do I do something? There's a lot of literature online for Hitman.
Oh, yeah.
It is one of the most discussed games of the last few years.
It has a very passionate fan base, and there's just a lot of weird intricacies to the mechanics in that game that if you're not going for some of the Silent Assassin stuff, you're not going to be exposed to what counts as different kind of concealed kills and poison and using fire extinguishers and stuff. And then the game is updated so frequently to sort of deal with weird issues that have happened. I think they've taken out some of the fire extinguisher exploits that were in the game earlier that you could really cheese that game in some major ways with the fire extinguishers.
I had not tried any of that stuff, so that's fun. My other piece of stuff that I want to talk about quickly here is Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle.
Right.
Which I bought today, and I have played through all of World 1, so a good amount of that game, a couple hours, so I got a good feel for it. That is a great game.
Awesome.
And this is the most surprising thing to happen in gaming, I think, in all of 2017, is that...
Sure. Yeah.
Because I just remember because this was being rumored for a long time, remember?
Yeah, this was along with the Switch, this has been rumored for over a year now.
That Ubisoft and Nintendo were partnering for something with Mario and the Rabbids.
Yeah.
And I think when we started seeing the key art and the rumors for it, I just kind of rolled my eyes at it, everyone rolled their eyes at it, and it was like, whatever, we'll see what that is. And then it came out at E3, and it's like, oh, it's not a cell phone game, it's not a mini game, this is a full thing.
Yeah. It's kind of XCOM, which is a really weird, the 3 most unlikely, combinations, Mario, the Rabbids, and fucking XCOM, all, thrown into a blender, and somehow it comes out amazing,
So, it looked interesting, but there was, no way to really get a feel for it, and then people started playing it on the E3 floor and being like, guys, this game is kind of good, and I'm like, okay, well, I have a Switch, I'll reserve judgment. And then, Nintendo and Ubisoft had done a very good slow drip marketing for this up until release day.
Yeah.
And I was already all in by the time the reviews came out, because I was just like, I love Mario so much. I have no thoughts on the Rabbids, positive or negative, really. And I like this kind of turn-based strategy, so I will at least give this a try, because why not, But then the reviews came out, and they're all glowing. The game's got like a 90 on Metacritic or something.
Yeah.
It's a huge success. And so I went and bought the game, and by the time I brought the game home, I was excited to play this fucking thing. Which is so crazy, because at the beginning of this year, I would have just assumed this was some weird cell phone minigame.
Exactly, yeah.
And here it is, and it is so good. And I think the number one thing you need to know about this game and whether or not you will like it is watch the E3 unveiling at the Ubisoft press conference, and the director of the game is in the audience, and the Yves Guillemot calls him out.
Yeah.
And the guy just starts crying because it's like, I got to direct a fucking Mario game.
Yeah, because Miyamoto also was up on the Ubisoft stage, was a big part of that as well.
Yeah, and that's all you need to know. That the people who made this game, obviously, everybody, if you are working as a game designer, you probably love Mario. I don't know what trajectory would lead you to game design where you're like, I have no thoughts on Mario.
Or it's just like, I fucking hate Mario and I'm going to show them how it's done right.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of people like that. And of course, Ubisoft, everyone there probably just loves the shit out of Mario, and they got this opportunity and they took it seriously. There is so much love for Mario and all pieces of the Mario Kingdom in this game, and so many little visual Easter eggs and such good use of the characters. Like, fucking Luigi's special move on the battlefield is Luigi's death stare from Mario Kart 8.
Okay, sure.
Which wasn't even from Mario Kart, from the meme from Mario Kart 8,
Right.
So they love Mario. The opening cutscene to this game, whether you plan on playing this game or not, go on YouTube, watch the first 6 minutes, because the whole, I'm not going to spoil it, but the plot setup for this game and what it does in the opening scene and where they use some little Mario Easter eggs, it's absolutely hilarious and awesome, and you can tell what a labor of love it was. And on top of that, Ubisoft, when they put their mind to it, they're really good at making video games. They've got, depends on which studio you're talking about, I guess.
Sure,
but,
yeah.
But usually
they have made a lot of very good games.
Yes,
yeah.
That's what I'll say. And this is one of those. They took this fucking seriously. It is very XCOM-esque, but it's also that means it's actually a pretty deep game. I'm through World 1, which is sort of, for a lot of it, a tutorial world. But by the end of it, I had died a few times. I could tell there was some really deep strategy going on. The actual component parts are simpler than a Fire Emblem or an XCOM. There's not as many things going on. There's no permadeath. They didn't work that in, which...
you don't get it, if Mario dies, you go to your home base and there's just, a memorial with Mario's hat on top or something, and just, Peach is there crying.
They've announced DLC, so maybe they can add a permadeath mode into the game.
Yes.
Which would be hilarious.
Mario and Rabbids, the Iron Man mode.
Yes. But, there's not that. There's not, a big weapon triangle thing going on. But what it is pretty smart. When you're on the battlefield, you've got a lot of mobility, and that's actually, I think, the best thing about the battle system is that, unlike a Fire Emblem or something where moving is just getting into position like pieces on a chessboard, this is, I think, in more of an XCOM vein. Getting around the area is very important. People have different movement things. Mario has jumping abilities where he can jump on someone's head, very reminiscent of, Paper Mario or something. And... he jumps on people's head in all the games. I meant in an RPG setting where it does extra damage. That's what
instead of it being the platformer move.
Right. Yeah, that's what I meant. And so, but there's pipes on the map. You can jump on enemies. If you run past an enemy, you'll do a slide and do a little damage to them before you end up in a cover area. And there's 3 levels of cover. There's no cover, half cover, or full cover.
Yeah.
And if you're in full cover, 100% you won't get hit. If you're in half cover, it's a 50-50 thing. And if you're in no cover, 100% you will get hit.
I kind of like that because that's very much an XCOM mechanic of the half cover, full cover thing. But in XCOM, it's you have a 58% chance of getting hit, and you have a 96% chance. And sometimes it's it cut the bullshit and let's get real here. I kind of like that they sort of simplified the probability there.
In fact, all the simplifications that they have here are actually very good because I think you learn very early on what are your basic moves, what are the rules, and both you and the other team play by those rules. So it's very predictable, sort of the basics of what can happen, and then that shows you they can quickly start deepening it based on what will happen, and allows them to really showcase very good level and map design. Because what I was talking about the movement is I've already got some movement chains going that are hilarious where Rabid Peach can hit 2 people, from how I've upgraded her, along her path. So you can like hit one person, hit two people, then get into cover and shoot at one of them, right? But along that path, I might hit two people, and then I might, get to one of my allies, jump on them, go through a pipe, hit another person, go through a pipe, and then wind up in cover and kill someone. Like, there's a ton of stuff that can happen movement-wise, and the level design for each of the maps and like the combat scenarios are outstanding. And so I think the simplified combat really allows them to play to the game's strengths. And then there's different weapon types and things like that.
Right.
Although each character is associated with a weapon type and a couple of sub-moves and things like that. They never ladle it on too thick. Like, I do think so far, a kid, this could be a good first strategy game. But if you're an adult who loves this kind of game and is relatively good at it, it will challenge you right off the bat. Like, there's the final boss fight in World 1 was pretty hard, and there's one earlier on where there's these enemies called Smashers, which are giant rabbits where when you hit them, they will come and smash you with a giant like hammer or a brick and do like 60 damage to your character, which might be half of your HP. So you have to be really careful, but there's a lot of strategy in that where like Mario and Luigi both have a special move that you can turn on in the last 3 turns, where when an enemy is mobile, like moving, if they move in Mario's line of sight, Mario will do an automatic attack during their turn. So if you set it up right, you could like hit the Smasher, go to cover, shoot the Smasher. While the Smasher is moving, if he moves in the right line, Mario and Luigi will both hit him and he'll die before he hits you. So there's a lot of really smart stuff with that. And then the actual like story and the overall presentation and everything, where the Mario characters and the Rabbids I was going to say Rabbid characters, they're just the Rabbids. I don't think there's individual Rabbids. Have like merged worlds, and the Rabbids have come to the Mushroom Kingdom, and there's one Rabbid in particular who has acquired the weird VR headset thing that set this all into motion, and is accidentally creating this whole army of like evil Rabbids. And so in the battles, you have to like, by knocking out the Rabbids, you actually make them good Rabbids again, and then they go back to Peach's castle and build you stuff like the Amiibo hut or something.
Okay.
There is that's an unnecessary one. There's like more important ones, like where you go upgrade your weapons and where you go look at the museum for all your collectibles and things like that. But I realized like after World 1, I'm like, oh no, I have Amiibo hut. Let's see what Amiibo will work with this. So anyway,
have they made Rabbid Amiibos? Is that something they did?
I think with this game, like you can get Rabbid Peach, Rabbid Luigi, like the specific characters. Yeah.
This is a slippery slope we're on now. I mean, the Amiibo thing was already a slippery slope to begin with, but now we're just letting fucking Rabbids on there?
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so that's what's happening with the Rabbids, and you have to go through, and you're trying to catch the guy with the weird VR headset, and then I have not seen Bowser yet, but at some point Baby Bowser comes in to try fucking things up, because, they're not going to be nice about this. So it's all very fun. The graphics are very nice. They're not the nicest Nintendo Switch graphics I've seen, but this is also probably under the hood a more intensive game in terms of some of what it's doing, but it runs pretty well. It's very colorful and looks nice. And most importantly, in terms of presentation, the music is so fucking good, like outstanding. I forget the composer's name, but it's one of the main Rare composers from back in the day.
Is it Greg Weisman that did it?
I think it might be Greg Weisman.
Yeah,
whoever did Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, those
Greg
games.
Weisman, yeah.
And, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Because the other big Rare composer who did like Donkey Kong Country this year did Snake Pass, which was a great score in a game this year. So I like that both of those guys have come back and done big video game scores this year. But like throughout, I just enjoy playing the game just to hear the music, and where he'll work in like Mario themes and stuff like in the Peach's Castle area. It's outstanding. It's another element of just letting a different set of developers get their hands on Nintendo's toys is really fun. Yeah. So it's great. And, the Rabbid characters you have in your lineup, so far I have Rabbid Peach and Rabbid Luigi. They're a lot of fun. They're fun little characters. And then I've unlocked actual Luigi at this point. I think there's 8 or 9 total characters you can get. And you can swap them. Like, your party can only have 3 people at once. So for a battle, and Mario has to be one of the 3, so you really can only select 2. But you can select as much as you want before a battle. So like each battle you could have a different lineup in there, and they all level up together and that sort of stuff. So it really allows you to have different play styles and whatnot, and I'm excited to get more characters. I did just meet, I don't think he's a party member, but he was a boss, Rabbid Donkey Kong, which was a very funny thing. Like, so far they've used I don't know anything really about the Rabbids. A lot of people clearly hate them if you look at like the discussion online.
I mean, they just seem like they and the minions are literally the exact same thing.
Oh, totally. They really are. But what I like about them here is mostly they're doing riffs on Mario stuff. And so it's like, this is not a game necessarily for big Rabbid fans, if they're out there.
Those Rabbid fans.
That was not intentional, but there we go. Yeah, if you're a Rabbid fan, I don't know if this is like supposed to be for you as much as it's a Mario game, and then the Rabbids are there to have fun.
Yeah, they just happen to be like the Ubisoft property most appropriate, because they weren't going to do the Assassin's Creed Mario crossover. That would have been a little dark.
I'd have played it. Maybe hey, this is step one. Nintendo, if they get more adventurous, I'd play the shit out of that. Mario's the crew. It's Mario Kart, but across America.
This is Mario in like a super realistic like Mustang.
Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands Mario Edition.
Yes, yeah, where we send in Mario and crew to go destabilize South America, for our like imperialistic purposes.
Yeah, but Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. So far, I'm excited to play more of it. Another great game on the Switch, which is having easily the best first year of any console released in my lifetime. I feel pretty confident saying that if you look at the lineup of games we've had and will have. It is so much fun. And for some reason, whenever Mario does an RPG, it's really good. And this is one of the weirdest things, but it's been true since the Super NES and Mario RPG. When Mario goes and does an RPG, it's somehow always great. It's like just one of the things you can rely on in video games. And I love that about it.
Yeah.
And I love Nintendo opening the doors and letting Ubisoft play with this. And I want to see if we'll get more of that in the future, because Mario is very versatile, as we have seen.
Right.
And it would be fun to see what other things they could do with him. Like, not the jokes we were making, but there's plenty of other things you could do.
I mean, eventually, it would. I wouldn't mind. Like, if you have to, in order to bring Splinter Cell back, if you have to throw Mario in there, I'll take that to get another Splinter Cell game, okay?
Yeah. Like we've got Skyrim Special Edition coming out, and it's got the little, like, Zelda amiibo functionality. Yeah. What if Bethesda does a full Skyrim Mario Edition, where it's just, it's reskinned to be very colorful?
Yeah, instead of dragons, it's just flying, like, Koopas or something.
Yeah.
It fits right on there like a glove.
Anyway, what stuff have you been up to, Sean?
I've been up to a couple of things. Obviously, playing Uncharted: The Lost Legacy took up a lot of my time this week. I've continued my watch through of Breaking Bad. I am exactly at the halfway point of season 5, so I'm at episode 8 or whatever. So as you said last week, it's basically season 5A and season 5B, and it's good. Like it's something that's like, it's nice to finally get to the point where it's like, right, okay, I'm at the new stuff of Breaking Bad, because I remembered season 4 pretty well. Season 2 and season 3 kind of got lost in my memory at some point, because I think those are unremarkable seasons for a couple of reasons. It's nice to like finally kind of like start closing this chapter of my life where I've had Breaking Bad in the back of my mind for like 6 years or something at this point, to be like, I'm going to get back to it eventually. I need to remember enough of this that like it makes it worthwhile to go back to it. And it's been a kind of a fun process visiting that show.
See, I easily think season 3 is the best Breaking Bad season, but 5B would be runner-up for me. So I'm excited, and I think 5A is the weakest stretch. So I'm excited to see what you think of 5B.
Yeah, like 5A is a weird one, because like there's parts of me that feel like they take a couple of like really glaring narrative shortcuts in places. But at the same time, there's something so nice about the show just being this good, like, fuck it, it's just a crime thing. Like, let's just make a fucking, like, let's just be The Godfather, or, like, The Godfather 2 at this point. Like, let's just get there, because we've spent fucking, like, 50 episodes trying to get there. And there's just, that's one of the reasons why season 2 and 3 frustrate me, is that there's a lot of, in that show, Walt and Jesse waffling between these two character points, and not, like, heading like in like the like confident sort of direction it feels like the show wants them to head in, and keeps on having to sort of come up with narrative reasons to sort of reset their characters in different ways. And so that got frustrating to me. So I've just enjoyed the like, fuck it, like let's just go full Scarface with this shit and just be there, because it's the point the show has been working towards, and there's like a nice sort of culmination in that, even if they had to like, again, like they had to take some pretty significant narrative shortcuts to get there. Once you get over that, I think the season 5A is a very enjoyable season of TV or whatever. Like a half season of TV.
It's good by TV standards, totally.
Yeah. So there's that. The other stuff I've been doing, I haven't like just sort of messing with Sonic Mania here and there. But the other thing I'm happy to have sort of like seen through to like my full satisfaction is I have finished my weird completionist playthrough of Nier Automata. So like I have done practically everything there is to do in that game. I've done all the side quests. I leveled up. I leveled up basically all the weapons. I got all the pods and leveled all the pods up, which is actually not nearly as like painful as I thought it was going to be, looking at how to get them. And it actually only took me like an hour of listening to a podcast to get like the weird extra resources you need, and if you sort of figure out the ways to expedite the process of getting the pure water or whatever fucking random bullshit you need to do that, it's not that hard to do. But the one thing that is really interesting about playing Nier Automata, once you have done all that stuff and you have this like super completely utterly maxed out character, is that game is fucking insane when you are that powerful. Like the stuff that upgrading your pods does, of like the laser pod ends up shooting out like 100 weird like homing projectiles every time it like recharges, and you can press the button again, and that will, if you get up close on something, will just shred basically any enemy in the game. If you know how to do it, you can get to level 99 in about 15 minutes, and you like there's like a way that, like if you use like stack up on XP gain, plug-in chips and all that kind of stuff, and like if you know how to game some of the plug-in chip stuff, once you're later in the game, there's just like a surprising amount of depth to the character customization in that game once you are like at that level of it. That is actually a lot of fun to engage with, and just like go through that game and just steamroll everything. Other than the sort of significant challenge that is left for you at the end of that game, is that there is a secret boss that is kind of like a 2-stage secret boss that is kind of like the last side quest in the game, and that is that's just something that if people have not, like for understandable reasons, if you haven't seen it, because you have to basically be level 99 to do that boss fight, I would recommend going on YouTube and watching it, because it is a really interesting fight, and like what they do narratively with the character that's involved was like really emotionally affecting in a way I didn't like expect it to be for something that's like a weird hidden extra thing that's at the end of the game. It's a really interesting, fun boss fight, and two, it has like a narrative wrapping around it that's really powerful.
So do you have all the trophies in that now, too?
Not quite, because some of the trophies are just, like, weird. Like, I could go in and buy the trophies, because there's something there. I have all the trophies that are, like upgrade all the weapons, get to do all the side quests. I have all, like, the ones that feel meaningful. There's just a bunch of, like, little random ones, like, travel 50 kilometers on the back of an animal and stuff like that I could go in.
All those mechanics in the game that have no purpose for being there.
I mean, they have a purpose if you're doing a completionist run, because there are like there are areas of like if you're trying to get all the different enemy varieties, it is useful to be able to travel distances on a boar or whatever and be able to like get there quickly and stuff. Like there's a level to that game that is something that you don't access unless you are like doing a completionist playthrough. Like there's a surprising amount of hidden stuff in that game, and like hidden areas and stuff. That's cool to see. The other thing about Nier Automata that I want to talk about, because it's really crazy, is I just enjoyed that game so much that even though I wasn't super interested in the pitch of the DLC, I was like, it's DLC, because it was like on sale for a little bit when I picked it up. I was like, I'll buy this like weird like piece of like $8 DLC or whatever. That is mostly what I understood it to be, just like a series of combat arenas, which it mostly is. And it is fun. It is fun being able to sort of engage with the combat in this more like sort of focused sort of challenge arena space. That is what like the bulk of that DLC is. And there's one of the arenas that you go into as 9S. You have to complete as different hacked robots and fight as the hacked robots. And that's fun to do because you don't have a huge amount of opportunity to play around with those mechanics in the game otherwise. So the DLC is I would not necessarily say like for that stuff it's worth just going and picking up and playing it immediately. It is if you are doing a secondary playthrough of Nier Automata, it is fun to be able to do that stuff while you are leveling up, because it's sort of you hit the other challenges as you go through the game. The thing about the DLC that is fucking crazy that I had no idea was there is there's this whole thing at the end that I had never saw hinted. Like, this is not I'm sure, like, everybody, if you were, like, mildly curious about Nier Automata, saw that there was, like, a secret part of the DLC is, like, a special boss fight that's with the, like, CEO of Square Enix and stuff. That's, like, there's weird stuff there, but that was publicized. There's, the ending of the DLC has this crazy fucking coda to it that just kind of comes out of nowhere. And if it's okay with you, Jonathan, I'd like to be able to just spoil it.
I'm never going to play it.
You're not going to play it, because you'd have to play through the whole game to get to it. And so this is, if you do not want to know about this at all, like, skip ahead in the podcast a little bit. I think it's cool. If you have bought the DLC, like, play through all the DLC and see this thing fresh. Like, don't let that be spoiled. But, like, if you haven't bought the DLC, I think it's fine to listen to this, because it's a lot of work to go through to see it. But so basically what happens is, the DLC is framed, as with a lot of DLC, as you just get this like mysterious letter from something, And that you're like, oh, like you should like go to this place, and it's like a series of coordinates, and it's like the series of quests that you follow to get to the 3 different arenas that are in the game is called the Mysterious Invitation. And at first, I thought that was just like when you buy a piece of DLC in Skyrim, and you just like a random dude walks up and is like, here's a letter, and you read the letter, it's like, oh, hello, Dragonborn, the stuff you bought is over here, but like couched in like lore terms. It's like, this is where you go to like see the thing that you paid $15 to see. And I thought that was the extent of it. But once if you beat all the arenas, you get a like update on that quest that is like you get another thing of coordinates that brings you to a 4th location. It's like, oh, this is weird, because I saw because I like completed all of those challenges and then completed like the extra special challenge you have to do. I thought I saw everything that was in this weird piece of DLC. What is the fuck is in this place? So you go to the amusement park area, and when you're at the amusement park, one of the walls has been like pushed back, and there's an elevator back there, and you go down the elevator, and you end up in a room that is basically a carbon copy of the 9S game hacking or game creation side quests. If you played those, it's like that kind of room. And you go in there, and there's like a little TV. And there's like, what is on the TV? This is weird. And you go into the TV. And then what follows is like a really interesting, cool, like 10-minute story thing where you play from the perspective of this robot called Plato 4672 or something like that. It's some number who's it's like kind of dysfunctional combat robot. And you're seeing this recording and kind of playing as him from the events like leading up to the game. Like you see the big construction robots like Marks and Engels being built here. So it's like kind of gives you this framework of where it's being set. And it's this fun little, like, you're just kind of, like, walking around and get to talk to the robots and kind of get this interesting, like, the robot side of things in, like, that small perspective. And then you slowly get the sense of, like, okay, like, this robot you're playing as is dysfunctional. He doesn't work very well. His arm is all fucked up. And, like, there's just circuits popping out. And every once in a while, he just kind of breaks down for a second and takes half a second to sort of, like, put himself back together and keep on walking. And you go through a couple of little story sections with him, and at the end of each section, he talks to you, the player, basically in the first person. It's like, I am Plato 7642, like, I am a combat robot, but I do not like to fight, is the last thing he says. And then the next story section is from an engineer robot's point of view, and it's just like, oh, that's kind of weird, and like, why am I playing as this other dude? And you're just walking through this engineer robot, but as you talk to the other robots, you get these little snippets about how Plato, apparently in the last battle, went crazy and just went nuts and destroyed, like was killing friendly robots and the androids and was just going crazy. And you're like, what the fuck happened? Because the last thing I played as Plato was my ass getting kicked by a giant robot in like a trial fight that there's no way to win. How did he go from there and saying like, I am Plato 7642, I do not like to fight, and go to like snapping and killing everything? And when you get to the end of that story segment, you find out, you get another first-person piece of narration from Plato that tells you that he had only one friend in the whole world, which was a doll he found, like a human doll, that none of the other robots liked to talk to him, and he had this doll, and this doll was like, he would find this doll after his combat training where he just got, like, basically shot to pieces by these other robots, and just hang out with this doll and talk to it. It's a lifeless doll, so it couldn't do anything with him, but he just talks to it, and he leaves it in this factory. And then when the androids come and attack, they blow up the factory and destroy the doll, and that's what sends him crazy. So it's like, it's a nice, fun little, like dark, Nier Automata-esque story. What's fucking nuts is what immediately follows that is a live-action music video set to a J-Rock song where you have a CGI version of, like, the big, weird, like, bulbous robot dude in a control room watching a video of this really well-cut, actually like really disturbing music video of these like rugged, dirty, like kind of half destroyed dolls in this factory just getting destroyed in like really sadistic ways, like drills being shot into their head and they're just being crushed and set on fire. And you watch it, it's like a full 3-minute long music video, and you watch the whole thing, and it's fucking crazy because it just comes utterly out of nowhere. You just cut to live action, like all this live action footage, what seems like a really nicely produced music video. It seems like it's fairly expensive, like it's all like the actual collections of really nice looking dolls that they just utterly brutalize. And you don't realize that side of like everyone, like most people find those kinds of like, you know, the porcelain weird like girl dolls kind of creepy, and it's like the horror movie thing. But you don't think about how they are simulacrums of humans, like they look like humans, and seeing them be tortured and torn apart. After you watch that for like 2 minutes, it's kind of disturbing and fucked up, and it makes you think about some shit that is actually like really thematically resonant with the entire plot of Nier Automata in a way that I was utterly taken aback by. Because again, I heard nothing about this. I had no idea that this was in the game, and that's what they choose to end the DLC with. And that is the last thing I have done in Nier Automata is watch that fucking music video, and it dumps you out to the main menu. And I turned off the game and was like, that's it. I can't go back to this game for like 5 more years or something at least, because this has been one of the most surreal experiences I've ever had in video gaming. This whole bizarre, beautiful thing that Nier Automata is.
Boy, I don't think I have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would just recommend go on YouTube. I'm sure you can find the music video somewhere. You just use search terms to go track it down, because I don't remember what the name of the song is. But watch that music video because it's really good. It's really fucked up. It's a crazy way for them to like send Nier Automata out with the DLC they released like 2 months after launch.
All right, let's move on to some news.
All right.
A couple pieces of news here. First, let's follow up our big news item from last week, which was the great Super NES Classic Preorder fuck-up of 2017. Part 2.
Yes.
On Friday, Walmart briefly had pre-orders, and it was very confusing, and I'm actually part of this story in a weird way.
Yes, I've followed this on Twitter from a lot of people, including you.
All right, so like I said, Walmart, it was very confusing because Walmart actually opened a separate second page. So if you were using your old Walmart page that never had pre-orders up, you had to go to the second one that was kind of hidden that they opened, which was good. That's how you stop like bots and stuff. So that was nice of them. And when this happened, it's actually very funny. I was editing an upcoming Let's Play video that we made, and I like finished editing it, and I closed the window of Final Cut and opened Twitter just because it's like, I haven't checked Twitter in a while. And like the first tweet was someone saying, oh my god, it's up on Walmart. And so I just totally by happenstance, I was there, ground zero, pre-ordered it, gave them my credit card. This all on Walmart. And I had a Walmart account from the last time there was a SNES Classic pre-order there that did not go through.
Yeah.
Anyway, which is an important part of this story. And I pre-ordered a Super NES Classic. And I was like, I was very skeptical. I was not like celebrating or anything. Right. I was like, well, we'll see what comes of this. And what came of that was, then I went and was doing some other stuff because I was finishing up some video production, and about 20 minutes later, I realized I haven't gotten an email about this. This was probably a mistake.
Right.
And then I look online, and I look at my account, I'm like, oh, it's not even showing up in my Walmart account. This is weird. And then I went to my bank, and I'm like, but they've charged me $85. And at that point, I'm like, well, I need to get this sorted out.
Right, yeah, because you do not want to be charged $85 for a Super Nintendo Classic you're not going to get.
Yeah, and despite protestations of weird fanboys, one of which I got my first death threat on Twitter, by the way. For this.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Did report, apparently not a terms of service violation. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, of course not. No, there's no reason for Twitter to crack down on death threats. It's just totally normal.
Anyway, I got my first death threat on Twitter for this, but what people were saying was, because I complained, like, one of the things I said on Twitter during all of this is like, this doesn't happen for any other product I've ever ordered online. Why does this only happen for this specific brand of Nintendo product? And people were like, you must have never ordered online then, because this happens for everything. It's like, no. It's like, Sean, you order online a lot. Does this happen for anything else? We're like,
no.
Like the email is just delayed for 4 hours.
No.
It's so bizarre. Like, and my Nintendo bona fides I think are pretty well set.
Absolutely.
I have gotten all of the 3DS models, the original, the 3DS XL, the new 3DS XL on launch day, and this has not happened to me. I've gotten countless Nintendo special editions, the Switch, all of this stuff.
Some would say that maybe your relationship with Nintendo is slightly unhealthy.
Yes, no. So maybe not as unhealthy as the people who were being weird online about this.
No.
But no, it's like, this doesn't happen for other stuff. So fuck right off with that first. So I think I was right to be a little concerned. And I got on, because Walmart has like a customer chat thing, and I just wanted to ask about it. Like, is it delayed in the system? Something like this. And they were able to, and basically I went through the chat with this woman, and she finally said, yeah, it looks like this was a mistake. I don't think this is supposed to happen. We're not going to sell them until September 29th. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. This is probably actionable news. And I took a screenshot, and I tweeted it. This got retweeted by Jason Schreier of Kotaku, which led to a clusterfuck in my Twitter mentions. And, again, the death threat and all that stuff. And a lot of people, my favorite one was the, conspiracy theory of, if you tell customer service, that's when they cancel them, you fucked it up for everyone. That's I don't think that's how it works, guys. No. Anyway.
It's not like quantum physics. It's not like when you observe it, then it, disappears.
And I feel slightly bad for all of this, not for any of those reasons, but because... And again, I just tweeted something that I thought it was interesting to put out there because everyone was confused. And yeah, it did finally show up in my Walmart order history about 2 hours later, and I got an email about 4.5 hours later. Again, I would not call that a normal situation.
No.
But anyway, so it's in there. It's been long enough, and Walmart has not addressed it, that I think this might be genuine. Again, I don't have my hopes up. Whenever I go to my Walmart order history page, I have my current Super NES pre-order, and right beneath it, the canceled one from July, where they canceled everyone's, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't have my hopes up necessarily. It does seem like these were real, and they went through, and the customer service agent was probably confused, which is totally understandable.
Yeah.
But, it's like, this just speaks to the whole clusterfuckery of all of this, right? That it happened again. It was very confusing. Walmart is the only retailer that's had this second round of pre-orders. These ones did last like 2 minutes, so about twice as long as the previous round. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy I have a pre-order. Don't know if it'll actually go through, but we'll see. People are still reaching out to me on Twitter asking, like, did you get your email or something? It's like, yeah, so I have it. That doesn't mean something can't go south with this eventually.
Yes, because again, we have been through this rodeo with Walmart once before in this sordid tale of ours.
And it's just, and my question, and again, it doesn't reduce like my frustration with the whole thing that I might actually get one of these.
Right.
I'm happy I will. I'll get to cover it on the podcast and I'll get to play it and all that stuff. But I would like it if everyone could do that. And I'd like it if it was clear when you're ordering what's happening with your money and that sort of thing. Like, again, I just come back to the main point I made on Twitter on Friday, which is I would like someone from Walmart, Amazon, Target, GameStop, or, God forbid, Nintendo themselves to explain why with this one item, this is how the internet works. Because it's very weird, Because, like, when I go buy tickets to a Bruce Springsteen concert online, that's a pretty hot item. Those sell out pretty fast. You know what they do on, like, altitude tickets or something? They put you in a waiting lobby, and, like, they fill it in queues, and then, like, they release, and, like, okay, these next 1,000 people can go buy their tickets. And you don't have issues where, like, oh, shit, we sold row 5A 10 times, and we have to cancel it. That doesn't happen for, like, concerts and stuff. So, I'm just saying, like...
Or, like, the Nintendo Switch.
Yes,
like,
sure.
they like, the issue with the Nintendo Switch is that, like, they could have, like, hopefully made more of them. But it wasn't like there were, like, the stories of people at the time just being like, well, I ordered my Nintendo Switch from Walmart 4 hours ago, and I haven't heard anything from them since. And then it's like, well, I guess Walmart put up the pre-orders for no reason. And then it's like, then they do it again. That shit didn't happen.
No, the Nintendo Switch I ordered two. One for me, one for my brother. On Best Buy, got the email immediately, and it was fine.
Yeah.
The
way that you order something it's 2017. It's not 1997 where, like, you would expect, like, well, I ordered a new book from Amazon.com, the internet bookseller, and, like, I think I might get an email within 2 days by, like, Pony or something. This isn't the Wild fucking West. It's 2017. We know how the internet works now.
Yeah. So, anywho, I hope mine actually comes. I'd enjoy playing it. Are my hopes up? No. I still think it's probably a coin toss.
Like, what do you think the percentage chance is that all of this is a dream and you're going to wake up tomorrow realizing that none of this happened? It's like, fuck.
A dream? I don't think it's a dream because I've been through this song and dance before.
But I think that's the reason why it's a dream is because your mind was thinking about it already because, like, think about it. It's like the Walmart thing already happened and fucked you over, and then now all of a sudden happens again, but you don't get fucked over? How is that not dream logic, Jonathan?
If the works of David Lynch have taught us anything, it's that anything could be a dream.
Yeah, so you're going to, like, leave my house, and then, like, a man covered in garbage is going to slide out of nowhere, and you're going to freak out and wake up.
Speaking of Nintendo fuckery, we also got confirmation Fire Emblem Warriors, the Koei Tecmo one.
Yes, the Dynasty Warriors Fire Emblem game. Not the gacha game that is Fire Emblem Heroes on mobile devices.
Right. Fire Emblem Warriors on Switch did get its release date for America. It's October 20th. I don't understand everyone's strategy this year, which is not just one area, but like the same week in October, we're going to dump every game on the planet.
Yeah, like another, that's 9 days away from Super Mario Odyssey, like the big Nintendo game of the fall.
So I don't really get it, but whatever. I do want to play this game, so I'm going to have a very busy and expensive October. It also has a special edition, and it's a special edition that looks cool because it's got a 3-disc fucking soundtrack.
Okay.
And I saw that and I was immediately like, It's never ending. This hell of trying to get Nintendo pre-orders for these things, it's never going to stop. And they know it. They know it.
Yeah.
And they're going to get my money. Anyway, so I'm waiting for it to go up on Best Buy so I can pre-order that. I recently got Best Buy's Gamers Club Unlocked thing because Amazon has kept rolling back their Prime benefits for their game savings. I really recommend the Best Buy thing. You save on fucking everything. You save on Amiibo. It's nuts. So,
I gotta get on it now. I'm gonna save on all those hot Amiibo.
I'm just saying, it's crazy how much you can they take stuff off on. So, I'm waiting for it to go up there, and that's the last one that has not gone up on yet. But anyway, I am looking forward to Fire Emblem Warriors. Although within all of this, when this announcement came out, I realized there's a lot of people who are proactively very angry at this game. Because the roster is mostly drawn from the recent 3DS Fire Emblems and a little bit from the original one with Marth. And on one hand, I get it, why the frustration, because everyone has a different favorite Fire Emblem game. There's a lot of Fire Emblem games.
No Lindis, no sale. That's what I say.
But at the same time, to me, it's like, guys, those are far and away the most popular Fire Emblem games. Like, if you want people to come to your Fire Emblem spin-off, it needs to be the characters the most people know. And we'll see if in the actual game there's more Easter eggs and stuff. It won't stop me. I love the recent 3DS one, so I'll have fun with it. Would I enjoy Lindis in a Fire Emblem Warriors game? Absolutely. But
I reiterate, no Lindis, no sale. I also don't own a Switch or 3DS, so there's no sale either way. But if I did, you gotta get Lindis in that thing, or I'm not chomping.
The funniest thing to me is just the Fire Emblem Warriors on October 20th, Mario Odyssey on October 27th. Nintendo is at this point rubbing their faces in, look how much first-party games we have for our system in year one.
Yeah.
We don't even have to space them out. And it's like, well, maybe you should a little bit.
Yeah, but you could release Fire Emblem Warriors whatever the fuck you want.
Right, yeah. Whoever is going to play that game will play that game.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, busy year with all that. Sean, you had an item on our news list next, which was some controversy that I did not follow around Half-Life 2 Episode 3 this week, so I'm curious to hear what it is.
Yeah, so because you haven't played the Half-Life games, right?
No.
So you're outside of the sphere, so it makes sense that you wouldn't have followed this.
Yeah.
But it was a whole weird, really strange turn of events that happened really late on night. I think it was either Saturday night or Sunday night. But I saw it happen basically live on the internet. It was one of those things where it's I'm about to go to sleep and I look at my phone before I put it into charge, and then I see one thing. It's wait, Mark Laidlaw, the head writer for the Half-Life series, for Half-Life 1, 2, and the 2 episodes, released basically what the plot synopsis of Half-Life 2 Episode 3 was going to be, and he did this at 1 in the morning for mountain time. Asshole. I was about to go to sleep, and now I'm going to be up until 3 in the morning processing all this shit, because I'm a huge fan of Half-Life. I have been since, I started with Half-Life 2 when the Orange Box came out, and then when I got a PC that ran something more modern than, Windows 2003, I managed to be okay, now I can play, the original Half-Life and play Half-Life 2 on PC and all that stuff. And so, I love Half-Life and Half-Life 2. They're games I replay every couple of years. I've, played Half-Life 1 probably 4 or 5 times at this point. It's just, a game I go back to a lot. And it's a franchise I care a lot about. The story is not the most interesting part of Half-Life, but it is an interesting part of Half-Life, and it's an important, weird thing to me. And for those who haven't played Half-Life, Half-Life 2 Episode 2 ended on a massive cliffhanger. Just a massive middle finger fuck off cliffhanger that if they had released Episode 3 within the year, the way that they had said they were going to do multiple times, it would have been fine. The way that, if a TV episode ends on a big cliffhanger, it's okay, yeah, we'll pick this up next week or, a couple of months if, it's a split season thing or whatever, and we'll follow on from the end of that episode. But, Half-Life 2 Episode 2 ends with a massive, named main character who had been with the series, basically since Half-Life 1, and then kind of got made more formally into a character in Half-Life 2, kind of in almost Sergeant Johnson way from Halo. He's killed off in this hugely surprising fashion at the end of Episode 2, right when you feel the plot's moving in to set up Episode 3. This character's killed off, and it's smash cut to black, and it's okay. Again, normally that would have just been fine. That's where you leave it off, and that's where Episode 3 comes out. Half-Life 2 Episode 2 this October will be 10 years old. 10 years, Jonathan. For context, Half-Life 1 came out in 1998 and Half-Life 2 came out in 2004. Now there's a 6-year difference between Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2. It's almost been 10 fucking years
and
since Half-Life 2 Episode 2.
And remember, we're going to talk about Uncharted later. This is the 10th anniversary game for Uncharted. So in those 10 years, Uncharted has done 5 games and ended. Mass Effect started and then died this year, a horrible flaming death.
You're talking about literally other than like the first year, the entirety of the 360 and PS3 generation of video games happened. Like we finished those and got started like halfway through this generation. That's the amount of time in like video game terms has passed since Half-Life 2 Episode fucking 2 came out.
Shenmue 3 is in active development.
Yes, The Last Guardian got announced and fucking like released in that span of time, Jonathan.
Yes, and we thought it never would happen.
It's like it's an absurd amount of time in video game terms. It's fucking ridiculous. And so that's like I had given up on Valve ever like following up on Half-Life years ago now, and we'll like follow this up after I get through this like the Half-Life 2 Episode 3 stuff. I think with a larger discussion about Valve at this point because it's something worth talking about. But anyways, so that's the setup of if you have not been following Half-Life, like that's where, if you're a big Half-Life fan like me, that's where I've been stewing for like 8 years or whatever of like the actual, I should say 8 years ago was about when I was like, okay, maybe Episode 3 isn't happening, and it's just been like, it's definitely not happening since then. And so you're maybe understand my like shock and surprise at Mark Laidlaw, who again like one of the main writers from Valve, who worked on Half-Life 1 and all the Half-Life games.
Where is he now, by the way?
He left Valve, I think, early last year.
Okay.
He was like, I think he was one of the first of a slow trickle of basically every single writer from Valve has left over the past like 2 years because Valve does not make video games anymore. And so he finally just kind of came out because he's also been like giving weird like random interviews and stuff, or like I mean people have been asking him for interviews where they will ask him about Half-Life 3 and Episode 3 stuff, and he's been giving like sort of circuitous answers about it for a while. And so it just seems like he just decided to put up on his blog this thing called Epistle 3, which is basically a like it's this like almost like, you know, the names changed for like to protect their identity thing version of a plot synopsis of Half-Life 2 Episode 3 that is a totally like, as someone who really loved those games, like a totally plausible and like actually like really good story of like, oh, this would, if they had made this, who knows about like what the game design would have been, but as like a story, this would have been a great follow-up to Half-Life 2 Episode 2. It like puts a close to the Half-Life 2 sort of like series of events and lore, and kind of like, you know, like resolves the death of that major character. It resolves like the like stuff that happened in Half-Life 2, like the original Half-Life 2 that kind of was ignored in Episode 1 and 2. There's like lots of cool little details in there. And it's just a really, if you haven't read it and you are a fan of Half-Life, I highly recommend reading it. Like not just for like the narrative content, but also like the thing is written in this sort of like first person perspective from, I forget what the narrative voice is, but it's Gordon Freeman talking to some like unnamed person. But it's also Mark Laidlaw, the writer, like getting this out here and saying like, this was like part of my life's work, and this has been stewing for 10 years, and you have been waiting for it, and like this, it's like a defining chapter of his career in his life. Like he was a novelist before he started working at Valve, which informed some of his approach there. But like it's a huge chunk of his life was spent there working on this franchise, because again, he was there since 1998 working on Half-Life 1, and so there's this really kind of touching personal side of it as well. But it also just is like this final stamp on Half-Life, and fittingly enough, the plot synopsis for Episode 3, as it undoubtedly would have, ends with basically a cliffhanger as well for like an eventual actual Half-Life 3. It is the kind of, because Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2 both also end on cliffhangers, but it's a much more like the story has wrapped, and it's like gives you this exciting note to end things on, like the end of Doom from 2016 or something. Sure. It's not like, oh shit, we killed a fan favorite character, what the fuck's going to happen next, who knows? That's a very different kind of cliffhanger. But it did, like, reading that, like, it made me weirdly emotional to just, like, all of a sudden, it was also probably because I was very tired, and so I was, like, in this not, you know, totally there state, but I have this, like, brought back all these, like, memories of, like, fuck, right, like, Half-Life, I love these games so much, and how much does it fucking suck that this is the way that it had to end. That's like, they didn't release, you know, like a short, like, animated movie. They didn't make a comic book, which Valve has published comic book series before, because, you know, in that 10-year span where they didn't produce any, like, or like not quite 10 years span, since like 2011 with Portal 2, they have not produced any like single player narrative focused games, but they've had like 6 or 7 writers on staff since then. So they've been busy just putting out Team Fortress 2 comics and stuff because those writers had to do fucking something, I guess. So they've put out comic books, like they've put out weird web comics, they put out short stories. They could have written a Half-Life, or like had Eric Laidlaw write a Half-Life novel or something to wrap up this story, and instead Valve has just sat on this franchise for 10 years, basically said nothing about it, occasionally alluding to like, we're kind of working on it, and it's like a big open secret that they have started development and scrapped development on a number of different versions of Half-Life 3 that have never seen the light of, like, any element have not seen the light of day. And it just really sucks that the way this all has to come out is just Eric Laidlaw eventually just being like, I assume and hope he probably had like the blessing of at least someone from Valve to go out there. Like,
well, has there been any public blowback towards him on this?
Not from Valve. No.
Okay.
Like, yeah, and
well, God, that speaks to how far gone the project is.
Yeah, that like he just gets to go out there and like put out his plot synopsis, and he did on Twitter sort of like couch it in. And understandably, of who knows if episode 3 had ever actually been made, how the story would have changed, because obviously stories for video games change dramatically over the course of the development to accommodate, particularly for like a Half-Life game, to accommodate the kinds of mechanics and stuff they're going to employ. But the story synopsis he did give like had weird time travel stuff in it near the end that seemed really cool. That would have been a cool gameplay mechanic. But who knows how, like, if episode 3 again would have been produced. I'm sure a lot of those, like, the specific details would have changed. But I think the general arc of the story very much feels like this is what they were building up to. This is what they were hinting at the end of episode 2. All this fits. It makes perfect sense. It reads really well. It's a great end to that story. And it is a nice sort of, like, coda on that area of my life that I no longer, like, it is a weird bit of closure. But with that closure also comes this sort of, like, frustration and, like, honestly anger at Valve as a company that has been brewing for me for a while.
It's one of the saddest things of the last 10 years in gaming, was to watch one of the greatest game developers squander everything they had.
Yeah.
And in favor of, I mean, it's capitalism at work. It is one of the purest examples of capitalism at work, where all this creative talent, they just, I was going to try this Steam thing. The money rolls in, and it's like, everything else goes by the wayside.
Yeah.
Everything else. And that's it. And, yeah, I mean, it feels like such a distant memory, the days of, like, oh, Portal 2 just came out, and it's so awesome, and no one's making games like this, and this feels so revolutionary. Can't wait to see what they do next. ... Like,
because Portal 2 came out, like, we talked about Portal 2 on, like, one of the earliest episodes of any podcast we ever did.
Yeah.
We talked about Portal 2.
Yeah, it would predate the Weekly Stuff podcast, the 200-plus episodes of it, and it would actually predate even some of the precursor podcasts we did. The first time we would talk about Portal 2 was in our first year-end episode on a show we did called The Monthly 10.
Yes, that would have been back in the Monthly 10 days, which is like the earliest.
Yeah.
Like, that's pre-monthly stuff. Like, that's super early.
Pre you being the regular, like, you and me hosting it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it was nuts. Yeah, it's been a long time.
And
it's so defined, like that generation, the early 360 generation, was so defined by Left 4 Dead, Left 4 Dead 2, Portal 2.
Yeah.
Valve was on, and then the Orange Box came out. It felt like they were on this unstoppable roll. And what stopped it? Oh, we can make more money selling hats.
Basically, yeah.
Right?
Like I have the Valve sort of like video game history or whatever on Wikipedia. I'm just going to like read off the games and then like kind of like the year, and I think you will see something kind of weird happen near the end. So it should be noted, like some of these games were not like exclusively developed by Valve, like some were like expansion packs and stuff. But anyways, Half-Life, November 1998, Team Fortress Classic, April 1999. Half-Life Opposing Forces, which was an expansion pack, November 1999. Counter-Strike, November 2000. Ricochet 2000, that's like a weird thing. Ignore Ricochet. Everyone ignored Ricochet. The Half-Life Deathmatch Classic, which was the multiplayer mode for Half-Life 1, June 2001. Half-Life Blue Shift, another expansion, June 2001. Day of Defeat, a big multiplayer game, May 2003. So you see there's no 2002 game. Like the first time a year has been skipped. Then some weird Counter-Strike stuff, like Counter-Strike Condition Zero, which was a Counter-Strike 1 expansion, March 2004. Counter-Strike Source, October 2004, the first Source game, a big update of the Counter-Strike I played is all Counter-Strike Source. It's an awesome game. Then Half-Life 2, November 2004. Dave Defeat Source, a multiplayer game, September 2005. Half-Life 2 Episode 1, June 2006. Half-Life 2 Episode 2, October 2007. Portal, October 2007. Team Fortress 2, October 2007. That is the orange box there. Then Left 4 Dead, November 2008. Left 4 Dead 2, November 2009. Alien Swarm, July 2010. That was like a weird indie game that put out. That was kind of fun. Portal 2, April 2011. Counter-Strike Global Offensive, August 2012, and Dota 2, July 2013. Though Dota 2 was technically July 2011. It was just in beta for 2 years, but it was out in 2011. And then after July 2013, you have Counter-Strike Online 2 that was launched in Korea in 2013. You had Left 4 Dead Survivors, which is a Japanese light gun game from December 2014. You had The Lab, which is the April 2016 compilation of basically VR, tech demos. And then you have their new upcoming game. I don't know if you've heard about this, Jonathan. They're making a new game that's going to come out in 2018 called Artifact. Do you know what Artifact is, Jonathan?
Sells you hats.
You're close. I will tell you what the subtitle for Artifact is: the Dota 2 card game.
Okay. Well, yes. There you go.
So that's
the sad story of Valve in a gameography.
Yes. After Counter-Strike Global Offensive, which was the Counter-Strike update they did to be able to exploit all the new monetizations efforts and stuff they had made into Steam, and of course Dota 2, which is just a prettier remake of a Warcraft 3 mod I played in like 2003. So I don't like Dota 2 is hugely popular in the esports scene and everything, but also it's like kind of hard for me to really consider it to be a new game. It's more like a lot of great spectator features and a lot of gross monetization on a super old video game that maybe the legality of Dota 2 is kind of questionable in the first place.
Just nothing like this has ever happened in the history of gaming, where you had a studio that made such great games and was so successful and beloved, and Valve didn't go away. Valve didn't go under. They're more successful than ever in terms of like finances. But they just stopped with the things that made people love them, and they are... What's most heartbreaking is they are completely okay being a hated company, because no one likes Steam. No one likes Valve customer service. No one likes interfacing with Valve anymore. Yeah. They are okay being reviled as long as they keep making dim bucks.
Yeah, and coming up with ways to monetize their consumers and players that, to me, like on the outside, frankly get like really disgusting at some point. The ways that they monetize the international with the prize pool, that they basically pull the prize pool from people playing Dota 2 that are buying microtransactions, but then of course every single step of the way Valve is getting their cut of that, which then the larger prize pool for the international tournament means it gets way more publishing and stuff and publication, and so you have they have marketing deals with ESPN. They get all the money they get from selling merchandise at the international, and like their specific internationals 2017 specific like hats and items and stuff, and all like the catering and food that they sell there is like every single step of the way it's just this giant weird gross monopoly that they just take a cut out of everything, and along the way they're literally exploiting the labor of the people that pay them money to play their fucking video games, and that's the most late capitalism thing that has ever fucking happened.
It's sad. I mean, it would not be that much a cut of their profits to have a team at Valve make a Half-Life 3 or make a Left 4 Dead 3 or a Portal, any of those.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be much of it. And what it would make them back in terms of like customer satisfaction of like, all right, Valve does a lot of gross things, but you know what? They're still making cool video games, so that's cool. No, they're not even going to take the cut to do that.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is disgusting. And, I think in another 10 years, Valve... Ultimately, the history of Valve, there will have been a very short period historically where they made games, and a very long period where they were a pretty gross leech on the video game industry that made PC gaming, big again, but at a interesting and debatable cost.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the kind of thing that I think back to that, like, the late 2000s, like, around 2010... I forget the exact year it was, but EA got voted like the most hated company or whatever, and like the worst company in America from some ridiculous bullshit, because the poll was given online, so of course it's not going to be Walmart that actually like legitimately exploits its worker force and like it, destroys local markets and stuff like that. It's going to be EA. But I think about that, and I think about like, dude, Yeah, like EA every once in a while like did something kind of weird or questionable, and like obviously like there's stuff with like crunch and labor issues with their developers that are legitimate to talk about, and like some of the weird DLC practices and like day one DLC and that stuff. Like I get the issues around that and that people didn't like that stuff, but at the same fucking time, EA put out video games, and EA didn't just like put out like Mass Effect. It's like EA put out Dead Space, like in Mass Effect was a new IP, and Dead Space was a new IP, and Mirror's Edge was a new IP, and like a couple of years ago, EA published a fucking sequel to Mirror's Edge, which was a game that didn't sell that well, but DICE wanted to make a sequel, and so EA was like, sure, you can do that. EA put out that fucking Yarny game a couple of years ago. EA is putting out that Prison Break game this year. They put out new, interesting fucking video games every single year. They contribute to this market in a positive way overall. They're not just leeches like Valve is.
Let's put it this way. EA is a business that makes money because they put out games people want to buy.
Yeah.
And we don't always want to buy EA games, but people love sports games. We love games EA puts out sometimes. We might think they get a clunker out, like a Mass Effect Andromeda, that in part is a corporate failure that game was in the state it was.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, yeah, they are a solvent company because basic supply and demand. They make something people want, right? Yeah. That's not what Valve is anymore. Valve is like, we found a way to monopolize this, platform, the PC, and get a stranglehold on it that we're seeing cracks in now, but not enough to topple that monopoly. And so Valve makes its money in a very different way than any of these other companies we could name. We can be annoyed at Nintendo for like underselling the Super NES Classic. That's a whole different level of problem than what Valve is having, right?
Exactly, because at the end of the day, like the video game industry, like the movie industry or the TV industry or the music industry or any like entertainment medium, it's an industry driven by creativity at its core. Which at the moment, when you're watching like the 500 superhero movie or playing the 500 first person shooter, like it can be easy to lose sight of that and get like obsessed with like the like commercialization and everything about that happens get along the way for these companies to be profitable. But this is an industry driven by art and driven by creativity and driven by the people that make this art. And EA, you say what you want about like making the 500th Madden game, but this year they put out a Madden game with a fucking like 4-hour-long story mode. It's like that's something that sports games almost never do. It's becoming more of a thing now, but like that's awesome and that's interesting and that's helping push the sports game genre forward in a compelling, creative way that is also hopefully like the people who play Madden are going to be interested by that. Like, I'm kind of weirdly interested in that because everybody likes a good sports story. And like,
nothing better.
I would jump into Madden if I could get like the sports mode for $15. I might play that in an afternoon. It's just like, at the end of the day, EA, whatever problems you have with some of their games or any other big company like Activision or Ubisoft, they are funding interesting, compelling, creative projects that are pushing the culture of video games forward. And Valve has not done that in a very long time and is way more satisfied in having their two cash cows of Counter-Strike Global Offensive and Dota 2 and just leeching off of those for years and years and years and years and years. And at the end of the day, it feels like, to me, Valve, like the closest other quote-unquote video game company I can equate Valve to is Konami, which Konami doesn't fucking make video games anymore, but you know what? I'm kind of more fine with Konami just straight up going literally into gambling with pachinko machines instead of Valve like pretending like they still make video games when actually all they are is in gambling.
Yes.
Like, at least there's a certain level of honesty with the pachinko bullshit.
Yeah, like
Konami does.
Konami didn't pretend to do the right thing with Hideo Kojima. They're like, we'll be assholes. Fuck it.
Yeah. But we're not going to pretend like video games are an easy industry to make fucking money in, so we're not even going to try anymore, and we're just going to go into pachinko machines. It's like, okay, fine, like, do that.
It's a horrible, to be clear, it's a horrible thing to do.
Yeah, no, it's like pachinko machines are fucked up, and like the culture around it in Japan is fucked up because it's basically like their versions of casinos, but you can't actually have real casinos in Japan because they're illegal. So it's like there's a whole conversation to have there, but there's something you can appreciate about a company being completely honest about the fact that they're no longer interested in being in an like art-driven industry and just want to be in an industry where they make the largest amount of money as quickly as possible, and that's literally it.
Yeah. Well, rest in peace, Valve, whatever you were.
I'm looking forward to Artifact, the Dota 2 card game. I think it's going to be a real banger.
All right, one last piece of news. We got to go through this quickly because we got to get on to the next things. They announced Yakuza Kiwami 2, Sean.
Yes.
How are you? Clearly, soon you are going to be able to play every fucking Yakuza game on your PS4 over there. How excited does that make you?
I'm super excited. As someone who just got into the Yakuza game earlier this year with Yakuza 0, yeah, like again, I said at the top of the show, I have set my Y-axis to inverted in Yakuza Kiwami because you were coming over and I had 30 minutes. I was like, I can't play 30 minutes of Yakuza. Like, that'll be half of one of the opening cutscene. So it's like, I set the Y-axis is like, I can't play this right now, and I'm sad because I can't play it right now. But yeah, I'm really happy that they are doing this with Yakuza 2, which is the only other PS2 era Yakuza game. So that and Yakuza 1 were the two most inaccessible ones. And they're also remaking it in the Yakuza 6 engine. That's what Yakuza Kiwami 2 is going to be. And so that's cool. That's like...
Is Yakuza 6 out here yet? I forget.
It's coming out later this year.
Okay.
So or I think it might be early 2018, actually.
So there's a lot of Yakuza games coming our way.
There's a lot. There is definitely, because they announced two other things there. Just really quick to go through. They announced a Fist of the North Star Yakuza game that, for those who don't know, Fist of the North Star is basically anime Road Warrior with the guy Kenshiro. People have probably seen the main character Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star do his like, what the thing and hit a dude like 100 times in 1 second, and he says, "You're already dead," and they explode.
It's one of the most iconic anime.
Yeah, exactly. So they're making a Fist of the North Star game where the main character Kenshiro is voiced by the guy who voices Kiryu, the main character of Yakuza, and so that's cool. And it was just like, that's crazy. And also the title of the game is really fantastic because in Japanese, the Yakuza series is called Yuga Gotoku, which means like a dragon, and then Fist of the North Star is Hokuto no Ken, which is Fist of the North Star, and so the name of this Yakuza team developed Fist of the North Star game is Hokuto no Gotoku. So it's like they just took the two titles together and made like a North Star, which I don't know what the fuck that means, but it's a really good... The English localization team is going to have a hard time figuring out how to, like, Yaku Fist of the North Star or something. I don't know. But, yeah, that game looks cool. That's a cool trailer. And then they also announced they're moving forward with the Yakuza franchise, that apparently Yakuza 6 is the last Kiryu-headed Yakuza game, and they announced their new protagonist, like sans a game, which is kind of weird. They just sort of like showed the character design and then showed a short teaser for this character, Kazuga Ichiban, who is, I guess, is going to be the new protagonist going forward for the Yakuza series. But he seems cool and different, nice. And that was kind of cool to just see them be like, yeah, like Yakuza games are going to keep on being made, and we're like going in a new direction with it going forward, which is exciting news.
It's awesome. It's the one downside for me of Nintendo having such a banner year is that it's pushed out the time I would probably carved out to play Yakuza 0 and stuff, which I will one day get to, because I'm sure at one point there will be a PS4 pack where I can just buy a bunch of Yakuza games.
All the Yakuza games.
But I would love to play these. It's just, there's a lot of stuff coming out.
Yeah.
But man, I'm happy for you, Sean, because I know you love these games.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's never been a better time to be a Yakuza fan, which I say having been someone who's a Yakuza fan as of 6 months ago.
Just a fan of Yakuza in general, because not like the people, but like the stories about them. Takeshi Kitano's got a new Yakuza movie coming out this October, on my fucking birthday, I think. Outrage Coda. The third Outrage movie. Yes. If you haven't seen the first two of those are good movies.
Those are really good. Takeshi Kitano also in Yakuza 6.
Yes.
So that needs reminding every now and then for extra motivation to get to that point. And it is the one thing about them remaking all these Yakuza games that is a real dilemma of, like, when the fuck do I actually play Yakuza 6?
Right, yeah.
Luckily, it's an obscure enough franchise that I don't feel, like, worried about getting spoiled on it randomly out of nowhere the way that, like, you would on Game of Thrones or something.
Right.
So it's like, I'm fine with holding off on it for now, but...
Well, if you need to borrow my PS3 to catch up on the other ones, it's sitting in my closet at the moment.
There we go.
Yeah. Anywho, let's go ahead and move on. Before we get on to our two main topics for today, quick Patreon shout-outs. If you donate at our $15 level, which is the Godzilla level of support
very good
on
level.
Our Patreon, very good level, you get access to two extra things on top of everything else. One is a weekly Q&A that I put up a couple days before the episode where you can just ask questions and we'll make sure to address them. Didn't get any this week, so we're not addressing that. But once a month, we'll also do a quick shout-out to our patrons, just to like a little credits thing of like who's helping us support the show. So I want to give a shout out. We have two this month at the Godzilla level of support, And I want to give a quick shout out to these people because these are two also of our oldest not oldest in age, but like oldest in support for the
longest
show.
Listeners.
Longest term listeners. The first here, I'll go in order of who signed up. First is Barry Donnelly. So Barry Donnelly, thank you for supporting the Weekly Stuff podcast. Barry also, reaches out to the show on Twitter, and I enjoy hearing his thoughts there, and then some of the comments and stuff. Always enjoyed having Barry on board and talking to him about his thoughts. So
Absolutely.
It's good to get to know your listeners. So Barry, thank you for your support. And our other listener who's done this is Kenneth Serenyi. I hope I'm saying your name right, Kenneth. I think I got your first name right. Kenneth.
Probably.
I hope so.
It's Kenneth,
yeah.
He's a dark elf, actually.
Kenneth is definitely one of our longest-term listeners because you might remember when we got our first good microphone for the show, that was from a donation Kenneth made. So that was like our Kenneth... I joked at the time, the Kenneth Memorial microphone, and then Sean pointed out, is he dead? And I'm like, no, so I worded that poorly. Anyway, so...
Or maybe he is, and his spirit is supporting us from beyond the grave.
Well, that'd be weird. Either way, Kenneth, thank you for your years of support and for being an early Patreon. That's awesome. I hope you guys are both enjoying the $15 tier, and I hope we get more people joined up. But Kenneth and Barry, two of our favorite listeners, not just because they give us money, but because they've been engaged for a long time. And it's one of our favorite things here to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's our shout-outs for August. Thank you guys again. And just to remind you all, patreon.com/weeklystuffpodcast. We got a $5, $10, and $15 tier, and we have a bonus monthly episode on Doctor Who. Next month's is on Tomb of the Cybermen. That's going to be fun. We've got 2 Let's Play videos every week, and you get those early and in batches, so you can kind of watch them all at once if you want. And then, there's a whole community thing on there. We have posts and things, and you can talk to us directly. So I think the Patreon is pretty cool. And thanks again to Barry and Kenneth, for, I think sometimes it goes by Kenny, for supporting us at that level in our first month of the Patreon.
Yeah.
All right. For now, let's go ahead and move on to our first big topic of the day, which is Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. So, Sean, how good is Uncharted: The Lost Legacy?
It's so much fun, dude. It's just a blast. It's a great game.
I have a few little quibbles with some of the story and character motivations, just that some of it feels slightly rote to me as an Uncharted fan, but it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. I think just to play, this might be the most purely entertaining Uncharted game.
Yeah,
is that fair to
so.
say?
Yeah.
Because Uncharted 4 is terrific, and I even said at the time, and I'll probably stand by it, that I think that's the best Naughty Dog developed game overall in terms of story and character and graphics and everything. But there's just something about Uncharted: The Lost Legacy being about an 8-hour game and just so focused and pared down, what's the purest things about Uncharted, but then also going in new directions with some gameplay things. And just every beat of it is fun. It never slows down. It's so well paced. Having Chloe as your main character is so ludicrously fun. It really does feel like Naughty Dog kicking back and just being like, let's have a party for our last Uncharted game and do a bunch of stuff we've always wanted to do. And it is such a treat. That's the word I keep coming back to. It's like coming home and finding a box of cookies on your couch and being like, this is awesome. And that's what Uncharted: The Lost Legacy is. And as someone who loves these games to death, what a wonder. If this is the last one Naughty Dog's ever going to do, and I would tell them they might want to reconsider that because Chloe's a really good protagonist.
Yeah.
But if it is, what a way to go out.
Absolutely. It's something that, there's something really nice about the fact that it doesn't have to be this, huge boundary-pushing game, which is the way, the Uncharted games have been typically in one way or the other, either in terms of, genre conventions or graphics or storytelling or whatever. Each Uncharted game has been, this boundary-pushing, really huge AAA release. Which is actually one of the reasons why there's a significant backlash to, and there definitely was at the time, I think it's less than now, to Uncharted 3, was because it was much less of that at the time than Uncharted 2 was, or even Uncharted 1, which has its sort of weird issues if you find them clearly finding their footing with the sort of style of game, but still really push things forward, performance capture and stuff like that, and the animation and graphics, and just the wet gene tech was super impressive at the time. It was really a thing. And then Uncharted 2, obviously, a huge, crazy success, massive game, incredible just innovation in a lot of different ways. And Uncharted 3 was a slightly smaller step up, which I think, both of us think that Uncharted 3 is better than Uncharted 2, but it doesn't necessarily have that reputation everywhere else. I think largely because it wasn't, if you're following those games at the time, it wasn't this huge step up from Uncharted 2 the way Uncharted 2 was from 1. And there's something really nice about The Lost Legacy just being like, you know what, we don't have to be a part of that, like, because we're a $40 expansion thing. We're like it's basically the Uncharted version of the Halo 3 ODST.
And I think it's a great comparison also qualitatively. You know?
Exactly. That it just doesn't have to be this, like, a whole new engine, all new shooting mechanics. Like, every gun has to be a new gun. Like the story has to, like be, like, even a step above everything else that happened before and has to, like, push things and either make it darker or, like make the action set pieces even bigger. And it's like, it doesn't, like, the scale doesn't have to get bigger and bigger and bigger every time. It just is... Through, like, the kind of trick of the marketing and the price and the different protagonists, it just gets to sidestep all those issues that I think plagues not just Uncharted, but any sort of big action franchise, and just gets to allow it to be fun and just be a nice surprise. And like you said, it is like coming home and finding out that, like, your roommate or whoever just, like, bought some extra cookies. It's like, hey, you can just have these. You're like, fucking yeah!
And not just cookies, but for me at least, like, my favorite cookies. Because
exactly, yeah.
Uncharted is easily one of my favorite game franchises. I mean, this is a series that, like, if you know some of my interests, it's like they made it for me sometimes, and I just love... And this one, maybe more than ever, because I love the India setting so fucking much. And it's like, after Uncharted 4, which is such a great game and such a beautiful ending to Nathan Drake's story, you're just like, okay, it's over. And then, they announced The Lost Legacy, but we weren't quite sure what it was. And then by the time it rolls around, I think Sony wisely did not hype this thing up the ass or anything.
Yeah.
So by the time it came out, it was, I had not seen much of the game, and I was just sitting down and, like, an hour in being like, this is amazing. I didn't think I was going to get to play this, and here it is, and it's so fucking good.
Yeah. Because it's that kind of thing that it almost, for me, makes Uncharted 4 even better in retrospect, or retroactively more, because... Like, if people remember, I like, actually wrote a text review of Uncharted 4, and one of my, like, only real complaints about it was that, like, weirdly enough, Uncharted 4 doesn't have that much combat, which is such a strange criticism to have for a game, because usually it is so far in the other direction. But I felt like when I played Uncharted 4, I didn't have, like, if I got to the end of that game and felt like I had only kind of scratched the surface of the different kind of combat mechanics and enemies and weapons and stuff that were available, because it was also the best combat they had designed for an Uncharted game, certainly.
By
like,
far.
Maybe even better than the combat in The Last of Us, which are kind of apples and oranges. But it's like really well developed, really fun, interesting, compelling, like, different kind of third-person shooting combat, and you just didn't get to do that much of it in Uncharted 4, which was fine generally for the pace and style of that story, because it was like a heavier story, much more character-based story, and they did the quiet moments so well in that to let the game breathe. It overall worked for Uncharted 4, but I did come away feeling like I just want, like, I finished Uncharted 4 and went back to the encounter select thing that they have, which is very nice, that it's like you just get to go pick any of the fights in the game and just go replay them. You also get to see the exact number of fights there are in the game and be like, there's really not, like, you don't do this that much. And Uncharted The Lost Legacy is much more the kind of pace that Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 had. Which is like, I think Uncharted 4 did not need to have that kind of pace. The pace that Uncharted 4 had is great for its story, but I like being able to kind of have my cake and eat it too, of being able to have that very, like, darker character-based, like big, like, breathing kind of story, and then have this just, like, roller coaster ride, like, let's go for it, just, like, action, 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 like, let's just keep on ramping it up, like, cool new action set pieces, new kind of encounter designs, and keep, like, the combat moving and really make it feel like by the time I'm in the last fights of Uncharted The Lost Legacy, like, I have, mastered this combat system in some way and are using all the tools available to me in fun, creative, interesting combat encounters.
Well, in talking about the combat, fundamentally it's unchanged from Uncharted 4, but they do, like, they get to have a little more fun with it here, because it's not as grounded a story. Chloe is a different kind of protagonist. She doesn't have, we've always, like, the term ludonarrative dissonance was invented to talk about Uncharted 2, and that...
Well, it was technically invented to talk about BioShock, but then it was appropriated to be more like the Uncharted 1 and 2 thing.
Okay, I had my timeline wrong on that. Yes. Anyway, around that time, we can say, right?
Clint Hawking was the guy game dev.
Anywho, but around that time.
Yeah.
And part of it is because Nathan Drake does not seem like the kind of guy who would kill that many people, Chloe, probably not either, but I can believe her killing that many people easier because I don't think she has the same kind of scruples, and it's what makes her wonderful, right?
Like, yeah, she's not trying to pretend that she's above this stuff, like the way that Nathan Drake does.
Yeah, no, Chloe is never going to have her Uncharted 4 moment where it's like, I need to get out of this life, right?
Yeah.
I should say Uncharted 2, 3, 4 moment, because it's a persistent theme for Mr. Nathan Drake. But no, they get to just have bigger encounters, and like the last one in this game, before the big train set piece at the end, I guess spoilers from here on out, is so crazy. The number of enemies, the size of like the combat arena, and it's so much fun. And yet, at the same time, I agree it is paced more like Uncharted 1, 2, and 3. I think it's better paced, though, because I still think Uncharted 2 in particular, weirdly, because I know that's like a lot of people's favorite one. For me, that one has way too much combat in the last half. And I think this, The Lost Legacy is still better about, it's not just an endless stream of combat. They're always breaking it up, and I think it being an 8-hour package with a lot of different, climbing mechanics and puzzles and all these things, and then a healthy dose of combat, it never feels like you're doing one thing for too long. So I would say it's even a notch above the earlier games in that regard as well. But you're right, it is totally, you come out of Uncharted 4 and you're like, what an amazing game. But I want to have my cake and eat it too. Well, here's The Lost Legacy, where you get more of all the things that made Uncharted 4 great, but also focused where you get to just have more fun with it, because Naughty Dog, as you say, doesn't have those same expectations and needs driving it. It's just, what can we make that is fun? Yeah. And they have made something very, very fun.
Yeah, like, I just keep on replaying in my head the moment where, like, the Uncharted combat clicked for me again, because the Uncharted combat was, like, something... You can go back for, like, the full details on this for the Uncharted 4 review episode. But, the quick recap of, like, when I first played through Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 on the PS3, like, I enjoyed those games, but the combat didn't quite work for me. And then when I went back to them on the Nathan Drake collection, then for Uncharted 4, I fundamentally and like psychologically and philosophically changed my approach to the combat, that it was not, because Uncharted is not Gears of War, and the combat is not about hiding behind a cinder block and popping up and shooting someone in the head and ducking down and popping up. It's like, you can do that, and that is how I played the games the first time through, but it's really boring. How you want to play the game is the way that, like, the action set pieces are set up, and, like, play in character as Nate or now as Chloe, of, like, you're just moving constantly and jumping around and swinging and just popping dudes and blind firing crazily, just, like, grabbing a shotgun and just, like, firing it into the air, like, hoping to hit, like, the sniper over there, and just play it the way that, like, an action hero acts in an action movie, like, play it that way, and they are so much fun. And I just keep on replaying this moment in my head, and I have been for a while, of the first night I played The Lost Legacy, where I got to the point in the sort of like the open world thing that we'll talk about, and there was just a combat encounter in there where the combat clicked for me again, where I had it was so good, because the other thing I always do is I always kind of like intentionally force myself to pick up weapons that don't have a lot of ammo, that are like the impractical weapons, because that forces you to improvise in the middle of a combat situation, which is fun. So I had like a fucking pistol that had 2 bullets in it and an RPG with 1 rocket, and that was my entire arsenal, was that. And I went into this combat encounter where I was like stealth in the grass at first, and just kind of could see this combat encounter in front of me. And there I could see there's some guys, like, they're kind of like split on these sort of like, different big rocks that had big crags between them that you would have to jump between, and there were different swing points there as well. I saw, like, off to the left, there's one that I could swing from this rope and land over there and fight. Like, there were these 2 guys that kind of like standing close to one another, and there was another guy like a little bit above them. And so there's 3 over there, and then to the right, I could see there was a couple of other guys, and then further back, it's like, oh, there's some snipers and guys way over there that I can't really deal with yet. And I looked at this, and I was like, oh, I can kind of see, like, oh, if I jumped over here, I could, like, pull this guy off the edge to the right and kind of stealth my way around. And I was like, I do have a rocket launcher, and there is this swing point right here. And those 2 guys that were kind of close to each other, well, they just walked up next to each other and are talking. And they're standing right in front of each other off on the left. And I was like, I know exactly how to start this combat scenario. So I immediately, and I have no idea what Nadine, the co-op partner, was thinking when Chloe just does this, because this does not seem like Nadine's style for how to approach this kind of scenario. But I just jump out of the grass, throw my rope, like latch onto the grapple point, swing, shoot the rocket launcher in midair, in mid-swing, blow those 2 guys up, jump at the apex of my swing, blind fire my 2 pistol bullets into the other dude, just kind of like grazing him, land, punch him in the face, and take his assault rifle. I was like, that was like 3 seconds. It's like, that's one of the fucking coolest things I've done in any video game like this year, was just this like 3 seconds of shooting those guys with a rocket launcher mid-swing, jumping off, firing wildly in the air, landing, punching this dude in the head, and in like the same animation, grabbing his assault rifle and then being able to sort of like tackle the rest of the combat scenario from there. That involved a lot of frantic grenade throwing and swinging from trees and just random bullshit. That was in no way an effective way to approach the combat encounter, but an incredibly entertaining way.
Well, because the great thing is they're so open that you can approach them in so many different ways, and they're so fun to replay for that reason. I have a very similar story, though, from this is Chapter 4, the Western Ghats.
Yeah.
We're talking about, and this is where it clicked for me. Same kind of thing, where I was in this area in the Western Ghats where it's like a very inland area. There's no water. It's like maybe near a waterfall, but there's like these 3 little towers and kind of a big grassy area, and you can get a sniper rifle there. And I had that, and I got up on one of the towers and was sniping a few guys because there's a lot of them, and I died a couple times. Because the nice thing about Uncharted 2 is that they make it always hard enough that you have to be very proactive, you know?
Yeah.
And anyway, so then like everything went to hell, and I'm like swinging around because you can swing between these 3 little towers. And eventually I have no pistol ammo, I have no grenades, and I've got 1 shot left in my sniper rifle. And someone's shooting at me. It's chaos. I don't quite know what's going on. And I'm swinging, and then I'm like, oh, I have nowhere else to swing to. And so it's roll into the grass. Someone's shooting me. I got up, turned around. All I had was my sniper rifle, and I didn't have time to zoom in. And just no scope, fire! Don't even look. And the guy like, oh, and goes down. And then Nadine is like, looks like we got him. And I had to just like pause the game and go like, oh, that was so cool. Because it totally feels like that would be the beat in an action movie where like Chloe is like, oh shit, I have nowhere else to swing. Land, someone's behind me, turn, fire. Oh god, I got him.
Yeah.
It's so great. And it makes for these wonderful action movie moments. And it frustrates me when people are like, oh, Naughty Dog games are so scripted. And it's like, sometimes, but then you get moments like that. That ain't scripted.
Yeah.
And more of the game is like that than the other stuff.
Yeah, like, I think it's just one of those things where I wish that, like, Naughty Dog found a way to teach the player better how to, like, have fun with the combat.
Yeah.
Because, like, the third-person cover shooters that, like, I think are more popular, or sort of, like, the standard for that kind of combat, are antithetical to how you, like, how is the right, in my mind, or, like, the fun way to play Uncharted, which is, again, I don't think I've fucking ever blind fired in Gears of War, ever, other than with a shotgun occasionally in multiplayer when someone's very close up, but you never blind fire. It's like, in Uncharted, if I'm not firing at every single second of this combat encounter, I'm not having fun yet. Like,
right.
There's no greater joy than just wildly firing an assault rifle in, like, vaguely towards the direction of some enemies as you are, like, swinging off of a rope. It's like, there's no hope of me actually, like, really hitting anybody with this, but holy shit, occasionally when it does work, it's the best feeling in the world, and there's just this frantic, like, scrambling nature to it that if you are not, like, being really, like, sort of conservative with your ammo, and you're not staying in cover all the time. Instead, you commit yourself to being very active and moving, and you only ever take cover when, like, you really need to get some health back and kind of reassess what is the coolest thing I can do now. Like, that's what the cover is for. The cover is for to take a breath and be like, oh wait, there's like 2 grapple points over here. I can do some cool shit with that. Or it's like, oh, there's a rocket launcher that fell over there. I can do some cool shit with that. That's what the cover's for. The cover is not there for you to sit there and rack up headshots.
Yeah. And I'll say this, it's always clicked for me in Uncharted. There's just something about these games that just has always, even when I think like, okay, they're leaning on this too much, which I think they do in 1 and 2 particularly, it's always just clicked for me. And it's only ever gotten better. Every game.
Yeah.
And in The Lost Legacy, again, the underlying fundamentals haven't changed, but I think the actual like combat encounter design is at its best for the whole series.
Yeah. And the fact that you're engaging with the combat with the frequency you are in The Lost Legacy means I feel like you're more engaged with it, because in Uncharted 4, you could go like 3 hours in that game at like 1 or 2 points without engaging with the combat at all. And so when you get back into it, you're like, right, this is how you play this game. Whereas like The Lost Legacy, I never lost that flow halfway through the way I did with Uncharted 4.
No, absolutely. And let's talk about some of the other special things this game does, because there's just so many things to talk about. But let's start with the Western Ghats chapter, because it's amazing. I mean,
the chapter that's so huge that when I got to chapter 5, I forgot that this game was, and that all the Uncharted games are split into chapters.
It's hilarious because this game is only 9 chapters. 1, 2, and 3 are really fast. 4 is like half the game.
Yeah.
5 is like 2 hours, and then 6, 7, 8, 9 are really fast. So this one, and Uncharted has always done that, where the chapter breaks are very random, seemingly. But it's hilarious in this one because the game doesn't really get going until you get to chapter 4.
Yeah.
And then it's Chloe and Nadine have gone to India, and they need to figure out where to go, and you just are dropped into this area, and it takes you a minute to realize, like, oh, this is what they're doing. Because there's a brief part in Uncharted 4 where you have kind of an open thing in Australia, Madagascar.
Yeah.
And it's cool, but it's like it's not the most fleshed out part of the game. But then this is the Western Ghats. You just have this giant open area, and you have 4 main objectives, and you can also do some collectibles. I did everything you could do here.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And so you can. It's actually very much reminded me of like a mini version of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is that like. There's going to be a final thing eventually, but until then, you have a map that Chloe has, and you pull it out and you figure out where you go. You have a Jeep, and you and Nadine are going to go on an adventure here. And I loved it. It's like, I kind of want Naughty Dog to do a full game like this someday, because they're really good at it. And like building on those Jeep mechanics from Uncharted 4, which were fun, but again, not maybe fully explored in this one. I had the best time going around the Western Ghats and finding all of the little collectible coins you have to get to. I know they're not coins, but like the little relics. So you can get that jewel at the end, the Queen's Ruby, which makes for the best trophy pop ever, which is Yas, Queen.
Yeah.
So you get that. And then you have to go to the 4 towers and attack those. And it's a time, it's not only, like the game, like stretches its legs out in so many ways there, in terms of gameplay, puzzles, combat encounters, traversal, but also just the little conversations you and Nadine have, and all the little pieces of Indian lore you get, which I love so much. I learned so much about Hinduism in this game, and it's great. I think it's one of the best things Naughty Dog has ever done, is just this particular chapter.
Yeah, like I wonder how much of that is what like the original plan for that Madagascar section from Uncharted 4 was. Like it kind of like feels like, oh, this is why they built these mechanics, because also that Madagascar section has like a kind of similar setup of you have to go to like a number of different objectives, but in Uncharted 4 they're basically linear, and there are a couple of weird side things you can jump off the Jeep and go like find this like little, you know, treasure, but it's not the sort of more formalized like antique coin thing they have going on in The Lost Legacy. And so it does feel like it's them stretching their legs, like allowing themselves with this smaller piece of content to be like, oh, let's be a bit more experimental, because, you know, Naughty Dog has not done an open world kind of thing since Jak 2 and Jak 3 back on the PS2. So it's been a long time since this developer has tried something that's not that sort of more linear focused action game thing that the Uncharted series, and in a lot of ways The Last of Us is. And it does also make me curious if The Last of Us Part 2 is going to have some of this stuff as well. That like, especially with how successful it is here, like I hope they're experimenting it with that there, because The Last of Us also feels like that's a game that there's a lot of opportunity for you to do something with those mechanics and this kind of setup. But it does serve such a useful and interesting function for The Lost Legacy of you having this opportunity near the beginning of the game, after the sort of like accelerated opening where you're introduced to the villain and the main characters and sort of the plot setup, and a couple of like quicker action sequences that don't have a lot of combat in them. It is more just sort of the escape stuff you do. Here it allows you to be like, okay, we're going to introduce all the fundamentals of this game to you, like the puzzle mechanics, the combat and everything, and the driving, and just let you sort of take your time with it and breathe in this world and just go and tackle whatever objective, just go wherever you want. It's not a super huge open world, so it's, you know, you can traverse the thing pretty quickly if you need to. And it's just a very approachable way to sort of like sink your feet into the game that also, I think, allows this really useful space to establish the relationship between Chloe and Nadine, because it allows them to sort of adopt this sort of like early sort of casual friendship thing they have, where at the beginning of the game they're a bit more frigid, and over the course of this they open up more and more, especially if you, because I feel like you have to do the token thing, because
this
then you
is the
get
best part.
You get the monkey scene, and the monkey scene is critical to the story of the game.
I love that there's a long collectible sequence, and the reward, I mean, there's a literal reward that helps you find treasures, but the like narrative reward is you get to go hang out with monkeys.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Every video game, that should be the result of every single collectible in any video game ever. I would have been much more satisfied in Assassin's Creed 2 getting feathers if I got to hang out with a monkey at the end instead of getting a dump cape. You know, like that's where I would have picked up all the tokens in Far Cry 3 or whatever, or all the antiques, if at the end it was like, here's this dope capuchin monkey, man, just hang out with this guy. He's really fun and cool and a wacky dude. And that's what I'm into video games for. Just not a lot of video games give it to me, unfortunately. But the Last Legacy definitely did. And so, like, yeah, you get to have that fun relationship and that casual relationship in this, like, really, like, and from a game design sense, it's this really relaxed sort of mood. And then also in the story, it's a much more relaxed mood, and the pacing's much more slow. And that then, I think, segues into the sort of back half of the game, which is the much more sort of traditional Uncharted focused thing, that then allows them to sort of, like, complicate the relationship between Chloe and Nadine, which is really the core of the story, and make that feel more sort of real and satisfying than I think it would have otherwise been if it was a much more traditional structure, because I think it would have been hard to establish the relationship between these two characters in a believable way in that other, like, kind of older Uncharted structure, where they, you know, Uncharted got to kind of cheat because it sort of half does the work on Uncharted 1 and then really capitalizes on it on 2 and 3, where Uncharted 1 is like the story's fine and the relationships are fine, but they're a bit more sketched out. And Uncharted The Lost Legacy, I think, does a much better job within one game taking these two characters and establishing their relationship and building their relationship within the story.
Well, I'll even say, talking about The Last of Us, if I have one complaint with The Last of Us, the first half of that game is very slow. And I think most of that's fine, but I've, you know, on subsequent playthroughs, I've realized, like, oh, right, most of what I remember from The Last of Us is not in the first, like, 8 hours of this game.
Sure.
And a lot of that is the character setup. And it's like, you know, but that's still in the Naughty Dog, like, linear model. And it's like, okay, here in The Lost Legacy, it's a very different kind of relationship. It's a whole different tonal ballpark we're in. But I do see them like, here's a new way to do this character establishment and gameplay establishment. And some of that is that, you know, all the Uncharted fundamentals are there. They don't have to tutorialize anything. But it's still, I think it feels like a little step forward for them in figuring out. And they're already so far ahead of the competition on just basic character writing. To see them continue to evolve is so thrilling.
Yeah, it really, what The Lost Legacy does in that section is it capitalizes on what a video game can very casually and easily do, which is build up a relationship between the player and another character just by you spending time with them in different ways. And you just get to do that without it being heavily narrativized to you all the time. And it allows that section, even though, like, that Chapter 4 of Uncharted The Lost Legacy is not, like, huge. It's not this massive, massive thing. Like, the whole game is 7 to 8 hours long, and that's only, like, you know, in the first half of it. It can't be that big. But it feels big because of the way the pacing of the story works and because of the mechanic of the open world allows you to sort of take those objectives in any direction you want, and there's a lot of dead space between them that allows you to, even when there's not really much happening and there's like a conversation here and there, but every time you get out of the Jeep, Nadine's like, Chloe's like, hey, I'm going to go check this out. And Nadine's like, okay, cool, I'll wait here. Like, just those little interactions and that sense of that character being there is enough for the player to fill in the blanks about the relationship and the development of the relationship on their own.
And just the basic gameplay here is so good, because it's like all the stuff you do in a normal linear Uncharted thing of having some puzzle solving and some platforming and some climbing and some combat, and here's some driving and some cutscenes, but now it's not in any particular order, it's kind of in the order you find it in, and it's so much fun. Like, when I realized, like, okay, I have this long to-do list, I was so excited, and I think I played Chapter 4, it took me like 2 sittings, because it is that long. And I remember at one point I had to, like, take a break to go do something else, and the whole time I was thinking about, what am I going to do next when I go back to the Western Ghats?
Yeah.
And it's so good, I thought to myself, man, how is the rest of the game going to top this? And the answer is, Chapter 5, The Great Battle, has the best climbing sequence in any Uncharted game, and that is when you climb up Ganesh himself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, yeah. Like,
it's so good.
That's what you need in Uncharted is, like, especially at this point where, like, I enjoy the sort of what the climbing does for the pacing, but at some point you do so much of the climbing in Uncharted 4 in particular is like you need to do something with it, and it's like, you know, climbing on a giant statue of a Hindu god. That's fun. That's cool.
It's so... Everything in the second half of this game with... I love that they have made 5 Uncharted games, and the plot to all 5 is going and finding a lost city.
Yes.
They have never deviated from that, and no one really talks about it because they do it so well every time.
Yeah. It's not just going and finding the lost city. It's also like every single antagonist is the exact same too. Of like it's an Indiana Jones kind of thing. It's all of it is, but it's the whole thing of like the antagonist is also looking for the lost city. But it's like, but you know, your crew is way better at this shit than the villain is. So at some point, you are going to be captured by the villain, and the villain's going to have to try to use you to like solve this riddle or whatever. And within that space, you're going to have to find some way to escape. They do that in all of these fucking games,
and it would feel stale if it wasn't so damn good at it. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. It just turns out if you pull off a story beat with enough flair and confidence, it doesn't matter if it's the same story beat. It will feel fresh every time.
And it's like, I think what it is here is that they just cut loose with the pure, like, sheer graphical power of the PlayStation and their art design, and just, like, they go for broke in imagining these giant Hindu statues that are, like, and you really feel the sense of scale as you're climbing these things. And then when you get, there's actually 2 lost cities in this game, which I love.
It's true, yeah.
And,
the first lost city is a fake lost city. You have to go to the real lost city.
Yep, but both of them are just, like, so enormous and so ridiculous, but, like, the kind of thing you could only pull off in a video game. And they constantly have so much fun with it. And I am a sucker for the climbing sequences. They are like crack to me. But in this game in particular, when you are doing it on fucking Ganesh, and they've added in all the rope mechanics, and you have Chloe and Nadine swapping stories about Hindu and Indian, like, mythology and things like that. Oh, it is such a ridiculous amount of fun. And I think Chapter 5 is also where you ride the elephant.
I think that might be 6.
That might be 6.
Yeah.
Either way, the elephant stuff is also so great. Like,
elephant stuff's great.
Oh, they throw in so much fun, cool, awesome, unexpected stuff in this last half. And again, it's like, it's really made me rethink the thing of, like, Naughty Dog should get out ahead. I'm like, but they're so good at it. And we'll have to talk about that later. But, like, just the whole second half of this game was, like, me thinking, this should not feel as fresh as it feels. You know?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I think part of what helps make it work is that Uncharted 4 was so different. So it has been, like, a while since Uncharted 3, and it's been, you know, these games and their, like, methodology for making them has evolved so much that them taking everything they learned from Last of Us, Uncharted 4, and going back and being like, let's just make that kind of Uncharted game with everything we've learned in the new technologies we have, is really exciting because the combat's great and the rope stuff is awesome and it helps make the climbing a lot more dynamic in a lot of ways. And it's just the one thing I love about the rope stuff is that you have the option of, like, standing on the edge of the thing and throwing the rope and then jumping off.
I never do it.
Who would ever do that? But I love that you can, so that it's an active choice to be like, no, I'm going to jump and then throw the rope. There's no sane human being on the fucking planet that would ever do that. That's fucking crazy. But this is a video game, so I'm going to do that.
Yeah, and when I talk about the whole Ganesh climbing sequence, it's like an hour of the game that's like multiple climbing sequences. Yeah. But one of those is you're outside on the big tusks and stuff. And I remember there's one where, like, you just have to swing a ridiculous distance. And Nadine's comment is like, you know, something like, "Well, I didn't think I'd be doing that today." And it's like, you would have had a heart attack and died. Yeah. Any human. Doesn't matter how brave you are. No one has ever done anything like this. And I love it. I love when Naughty Dog just pushes it ridiculous enough.
Yeah.
And again, like, Chloe definitely being so almost like a self-aware video game character really helps sell all that.
Absolutely.
Talking about just a little bit more on the game. We'll get to the story and character stuff in a moment. But other things from this game I want to talk about. The puzzles in this one are so good. Yeah. And I thought they were particularly good in Uncharted 4 as well. But here, like, there are some that I loved so much because they were just hard enough and always just creative enough. I think the standout one is where you have these statues in the middle of the room on these panels that you have to move around, and they make 2 separate series of shadows on the wall. Oh, I loved that one. Yeah. And there was a point in the middle of it where I was having... It's a hard one. It takes a while to figure out. And I was even considering getting, like, a pen and paper out. And I didn't wind up doing that. But in the middle, like, my dogs started barking and I had to go attend to them. And, you know, about a half hour later, I got to come back to that and start trying it again. And I was just, like, again, the whole time running through in my head, like, oh, what's my next move? And things like that.
Yeah, one thing I just love tracking, like, through the Uncharted games is each one... I feel like Naughty Dog gets more and more like, let's put, like, an actual puzzle in this one. Because, like, it started with, like, Uncharted 1 has, like, puzzles, but, like, they're not really puzzles. And Uncharted 2 is kind of like that as well. It's like, it's a puzzle, but the puzzle is, like, let's take, like, the 4, like, Chinese mythical beasts of, like, the Zodiac or whatever, like Suzaku and Byaku and all that stuff, and look at Drake's notebook and match, like, red with red and blue with blue. It's like, it's a puzzle in that technical sense, but it's like a puzzle if you gave me the fucking answer sheet, and then, like, since then, now we're at the Lost Legacy, and you're at that, like, the Shadow Statue puzzle, which is, like, is supposed to be a hard one, and you're like, this is a puzzle that, like, a The Legend of Zelda game wouldn't do because it would be too hard. Like, this is, like, it's the kind of puzzle a Zelda game would do, but they wouldn't go this far with it. And I like that they're confident enough to be like, let's just do a hard fucking, like, let's just make it a hard puzzle. Like, fuck it. Like, let's just... let's make people spend a little bit of time on this and actually have to think it out, because it is, like, at first it seems very simple, and then you're like, oh, wait, shit, right, because I have to get both of the paintings lined up at the same time, so I have to kind of, like, push these blocks against each other and, like, keep them paired up, and it does it, like, it is, you have to, like, kind of approach the understanding of the puzzle in layers until you kind of get there, and it's, like, it's a really solid puzzle, and it's fun to just be like, I actually solved the puzzle. I didn't have the game just solve a puzzle for me, and I have to follow the steps. I actually have to think about it. I like that they finally are confident enough to really do that.
Oh, I love it. There's also like all the rotational ones you do in this one that get harder as they go along. I just every time a puzzle came up, I just got giddy. Like, it's going to be so challenging, but I love it. It's like it's probably what like Chloe and Nathan feel when they play. Or the characters are actually in these scenarios where they have a perverse like love for this stuff.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know how the fuck these ancient, like, Hindu people, like, rigged up this thing so that, like, when I try to turn this dial turns, like, in this proportion, and this one turns in this proportion, or they made these giant fucking statues that, when you stand on different plates, they, like, move in, like, specific frames.
That's the most
basically.
ridiculous one.
It's like, and I love that, because they have this great sort of running gag about everything coming in threes, and I love that, like, for Chloe, I almost kind of what you think of her being this, like, pseudo sort of self-aware character. See, she says it initially as it being, like, a game design joke, mostly, and then Nadine brings it up later as, like, this actual, like, kind of spiritual concept in Hinduism. Like, you're right, it always does come in threes, like Shiva's third eye and all this stuff. You're like, no, I think it's because, like, it's good to sort of iterate on the puzzle design 3 times, but by the time you get to the third one of the statue thing, there's, like, 3 different kinds of statues that all move in different ways that react to the different the pressure plates in different ways. You're like the fuck ancient, like, Indian people. Like, we couldn't build this now. This is too complicated. Like, this, like, you'd have to spend $1 billion in, like, this brain trust of fucking, like, NASA engineers to fucking rig this shit up.
And at a certain point, it's also like, the bigger question isn't how did you do it, it's why did you do it.
Yeah, because you also, like, if someone brought a ladder, that puzzle's over. You just walk to the other end of the room and fucking set the ladder up and climb up. You don't need to jump on the other platforms. Just bring a fucking ladder.
And I love how much Naughty Dog has made these elements their own, because it's basically all a riff on, like, the first 10 minutes of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
And that's just a couple of arrows and a rolling boulder.
Yeah.
And it's like, here, it's, as you say, there's just a bunch of statues that will swing a giant axe and cut you in half or something. It's nuts, and I love how much Naughty Dog has owned it at this point.
Yeah.
So good. I also want to say, from a gameplay standpoint, I think the final chapter is the best ending to any Uncharted game. Not necessarily in terms of, like, story and impact. That would be probably 3 or 4. But, like, in terms of just playing the ending, everything they do at the end here, with the train stuff is a little reminiscent of that stuff in the middle of Uncharted 2, but it's different enough, and they also have, like, you get off the train and you're on the car, and then you get back on the train, and there's so much ridiculous shit going on. I think all of that is so stupendous and keeps the pace up right to the end. I think Uncharted games can kind of sometimes sag at the end, where, like, they feel like we need to do a big final boss, or we need to have a big escape sequence, but this is just, like, focusing on the fundamentals, and you do have a final, like, fist fight, but it's not, like, completely out of left field.
Yeah, because they also have managed to, like, they made sure to set up the fist fight.
Yes, well in advance.
2 other times,
right.
Everything comes in threes.
Exactly.
So yeah, you were prepared for the mechanics. But yeah, it also is just the other Uncharted games, particularly Uncharted 1 through 3, they all end on this, like, big action set piece that is actually, like, kind of the worst action set piece in the game. Like, they're fine, but it's, like, particularly 2 and 3 both have the same, like, the city is crumbling and you're running away thing. And it's like, that's okay, but it's not as dynamic and interesting.
Uncharted 2 and 3 have, like, to a T, the second act thing from a lot of action movies, where, like, Uncharted 2 has the train sequence, Uncharted 3 has the ship sequence, and they just can never top that. In terms of gameplay.
Yeah, but the Lost Legacy, like, has some really awesome standout action sequences in the middle. But yeah, like, the train thing pulls everything together, because it does feel like they, like, looked at the train sequence from Uncharted 2 and is like, if that's what we could do with the train sequence on the PlayStation 3, let's show you what we can do with a fucking train sequence on the PlayStation 4, motherfuckers. Like, we're going to throw the Jeep thing in here, and all the guys on motorcycles, and all the fucking swinging mechanics and shit.
We're literally going to throw the Jeep in here, because there's a part where Chloe drives the Jeep off a fucking cliff into the train.
Yeah, because it's the way that it escalates to the, like, nth degree. Because, yeah, like, the Uncharted 2 train sequence got kind of crazy, where, like, obviously it ends with, like, it crashing off the tracks and everything, and then where you have the In Medias Res opening of Uncharted 2. So it's like all that was really great. But yeah, in Uncharted 4, you have this whole long sequence of like, and it's a really interesting combat mechanics as well that are thrown in there, and so they mix in like actual combat with the more sort of like high stunt work you're basically performing, which is one of my issues with the ending of some of the other Uncharted games. Is it's all just running away from something, and they're not blending the action in with it particularly well. But you have like all the normal action sequence stuff, and then it starts escalating where it's like, oh, now I have to jump off the train and get on the Jeeps and then get back on the train and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, oh, now I have to have an extended Jeep section to go like switch the tracks of the train and fight there. And then it's like, yeah, then I'm on the Jeep, and then I have to crash the Jeep into the train while it's moving, and then fist fight the last villain while we're up against like a giant bomb as the train is hurtling towards a broken bridge because we switched the tracks. It's like the action sequence goes so many places and escalates so many times that by the time you're at the end of it, you're completely out of breath.
And then, like, I love the note the game ends on where they're just, like, sitting on the tracks and high five, and we cut to credits, and it's like a stylized movie credit sequence with a song by MIA.
Yeah, with, like, all the chibi characters and stuff,
And it feels like you just walked out of the best summer movie of the year in the theater, you know? And I do think this is better than, like, and this was a good summer for movies. This is better than any of them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's just that thing where you can't match what you like the action that you can do in a game that you can have in a movie. That is just so much more involving and exciting. I mean, fucking ridiculous in Uncharted that it could ever be in a movie.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The closest anyone has ever come to matching the excitement that Steven Spielberg made in Raiders of the Lost Ark is Naughty Dog with the Uncharted games.
Yeah.
And no one on film has ever done that better. Naughty Dog might have done it better in a game.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. So, yeah. But let's talk about the characters in the story.
All right.
The story, I don't even know if there's much to say about the story, which is that they're looking for the Tusk of Ganesh. There's an asshole villain. They find the Tusk, you know, cut to credits. But, like, I do love the character stuff. I think Nadine might be a little underwritten in some ways. Just that, like, her whole, like, motivation of, like, do I want to get my mercenary company back? And it was my dad. And it feels a little rote to me.
Sure.
But Laura Bailey is so good, and the moment-to-moment writing is so good. But I really do like what they do with Chloe, where it's kind of funny because it is basically the Tomb Raider backstory from the recent Tomb Raider games, where her dad was a famous archaeologist. But I think Chloe is just that good a character, and Claudia Black is just that good an actress that it all worked for me.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Yeah, I agree that it definitely is that much lighter sort of action-adventure story that Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 are. But I do think they have a little bit more substance in there. That I like that they sort of broach issues of like multiculturalism and stuff.
I did want to talk about that, yeah.
You know, is of mixed race. She's like, her dad was Indian, he was an archaeologist, and her mom was Australian, and that's where, you know, because Claudia Black is Australian, so she has the accent.
Well, you know what? I think it buys them license to dive into like the mythology of the area a little more than they have in other ones. It doesn't feel as much like you're a looky-loo through this world.
And it doesn't have the like white savior kind of trope thing that Uncharted just inevitably had based on the premise and the main character being, you know, like white dude poster child Nathan Drake.
Yeah. No, but I think the game really does, you know, excel on Chloe being that magnetic a character, that magnetic a personality. And even as much as I like Chloe in Uncharted 2 and 3, which, you know, she's never been like the biggest Uncharted character. She's only in 2 of the games.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was a guarantee that she was going to be able to carry the game as well as she does. But she totally does. Like, just as easily as Nathan Drake.
Absolutely, yeah.
She's such a good... Like, she takes to this so well as the protagonist, and the writers at Naughty Dog do such a good job writing for her. And then I think taking Nadine, who was kind of nothing of a character, I think, in Uncharted 4.
Yeah, I mean, she was like the secondary antagonist.
Right. And taking her here, and again, I think some of the backstory with Shoreline could have been fleshed out a little more, but moment to moment, she's such an interesting, fun character to have around, plays off of Chloe so well. They're such good sidekicks. We'll talk about Sam Drake in a minute, where they throw him in, I think, at the perfect moment to kind of shake things up a little. But yeah, I was surprised at how much I grew to like Nadine in this, them as partners, and how much at the end I was like, where's Uncharted 6? I want the next one with these two.
Because I think that's how you like see that, then like kind of like prove that, even because I do kind of agree that there's a couple of places in the like Nadine's story arc where it feels like you needed to sort of like dig a little bit deeper into the Shoreline stuff and like kind of like make that speak to the player a little bit stronger in your storytelling. But ultimately, at the end of the game, like, I was so invested in the idea of these two characters pairing off and going off in the future and being, like, super cool best friends that go and, you know, plunder lost cities and have crazy adventures together. That's, like, that's what that story needs to accomplish. Like, that's what the story is about, is these two women who are similar in some ways and different in other ways, sort of finding those similarities and growing from those differences and growing together as friends over the course of the story. Like, that's what the heart of the story is about. It's like that, and then, like, the sort of the father stuff that they bond over as well. And they absolutely nailed the core of that story.
I mean, and who else could nail it better? This is, Naughty Dog is better than literally anyone else in this industry at the basics of character writing.
Yeah.
And just moment to moment, listening to them talk is fucking poetry, and it's so wonderful. And they really bring it to bear here, because the story is, as we said, fairly basic, but what they do just with as a vehicle for these characters is exceptional.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny, when Sam Drake, the Troy Baker character, comes in, I kind of rolled my eyes for a second when we saw that, because I'm like, did they really feel they needed, like... Because we had a Nathan Drake conversation earlier that I found very funny, and it was a good...
It was, like, the right amount of, like, addressing Nathan Drake, because it's like, you have to... He's an important character for both Chloe and Nadine for different reasons, but, like, I was worried at first that they were going to lean on that too hard, and they use it well. But I was with you that at first I was like, oh, no, I don't know if I wanted them to throw, like, actually have one of the Drake boys in here.
Yeah. Although earlier they do make that great joke, but, yeah, Sam kind of came out of nowhere, which was funny, like Chloe saying that.
I mean, I think they do set up that Sam is going to be in the story kind of subtly well, where Chloe says, like, I know Nathan well, I kind of know Sam, and, like, in the back of my head when she said that, I'm like, wait, the timeline of the Uncharted games, you wouldn't have possibly known who Sam was.
Yeah, like, if Sam didn't come in earlier, you would assume, like, I guess Nate and Elena had him over, had both Chloe and Sam over for dinner or something, you know, like that's the closest you could come, but which I don't think they would actually do.
No, that's a fucking like move. Like if you want to make the Uncharted movie, make that movie. Like I want to see that dinner conversation.
Absolutely, but no, but then Sam is used in two great ways. One, he drives an organic wedge between Nadine and Chloe, which I like. But then also, like when he comes in, he just like adds to the chemistry. Like, he shakes the game up at a good moment, and Troy Baker is there to just be funny and weirdly charming, and he does that so well, and just to bounce off these two personalities, but he is always there to further their progress. Like, Sam doesn't have an arc in this game.
No.
I don't think Sam has an arc in life, really. But it's so wonderful to have him there to just kind of bounce off and make Chloe and Nadine actually kind of become closer, because they both find this Sam Drake guy, they like him, but he's annoying. You know?
Yeah, I mean, he's a character foil, which is a cool, like, and he serves that role really well. And it's kind of one of the fun things about the game is, like, when the credits roll, you don't even think about, like, there's only really 4, kind of 5 characters in the game if you count the little girl from the beginning. Yeah. And one of them, Sam Drake, and, like, I like that they hold off on him for a long time. And then when he is revealed, I think it is at that right moment where to drive that wedge in the relationship between Chloe and Nadine, where they can have some friction, so that way once they get over that friction, like their partnership is even tighter. And it also does, I think, speak to something pretty natural about Chloe's character, that she would not be upfront about that stuff, and that she's secretly kind of like testing Nadine in her own ways to like find out if she's trustworthy, because Chloe's not going to trust anybody easily. And so like using that, I think, as a character foil works really naturally. And then when they do bring him in all the way, they keep him the right background distance of being the right kind of joke at the right time. And then also, again, like as that foil to sort of like demonstrate how different and way more capable these two women are than Sam Drake, you know? He's like, you know, the loser of life who somehow stumbles his way into these like big crazy adventures, and then always needs someone like either Nate or Chloe to pull his ass out of the fire at the last second.
And it's also fun because Sam has only been in the one game, and a lot of that game, where Sam is it's a much darker place. You know, he and Nate get to have a lot of fun moments in that game. I'm not going to say that game is overall super dark or anything, but like it is fun to have him here, just purely fun. And also, like, it should just be a rule that from now on, when Naughty Dog makes a game, Troy Baker has to be in it.
Yes.
Because they are so good at writing for him, and he is so good at delivering Naughty Dog dialogue.
Yeah.
You know.
Also, because it's like, there are no two characters more different than Joel from The Last of Us. It's Sam Drake from Uncharted. So I love that side of it, of like, the just polar opposite characters he plays.
I love the idea that obviously Last of Us 2 is in active development.
Yeah.
At the same time this was being made. I love thinking in the back of my head like that he went on the mocap stage to do like some Sam dialogue and like, hey, could you do some Joel lines for us today? And he's like, give me a couple minutes. I'm going to go look at pictures of dead puppies or something to like get in the mood.
It's like, I'm going to headbutt the wall in the hallway for 5 minutes, and then can you pull me in?
Yeah, just it's great. I mean, the range Naughty Dog has shown in the last couple of years is kind of extraordinary.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's talk about the game finishes. They high five, which is a great ending.
Yeah.
Sitting there on the edge of the train tracks.
Yeah, there's that great moment where they hit Sam and the cigarette falls out of his mouth. It's like, I lost my cigarette.
Yep. And then we cut to credits, and the credits are so celebratory. And I'll be honest, I know good things must come to an end, but I watch those credits roll and I'm like, I don't want this to be the last Naughty Dog Uncharted game. Yeah. I am not ready to say goodbye to this.
Yeah, I'm in the exact same place. And I would not have ever thought that after Uncharted 4. Like, I felt like... And in some ways, that's how I felt about Uncharted 3. It's also how I felt about The Last of Us. And then, then it's like, you kind of see a bit more of Uncharted 4, and like, okay, this looks pretty good. And then you play Uncharted 4, you're like, holy shit. Okay, this is really fucking good. And then it's like, and then I was very much Deadstone, like, there you should, like, The Last of Us is perfect, the story is perfect, you should not make a sequel. And then they make, like, the best fucking teaser trailer for any game ever. And you're like, fuck, god damn it. Okay, sure, make a sequel to The Last of Us. But there's no way I'm excited any more Uncharted after Uncharted 4. Like, you finished with Uncharted 3, and you pulled some fucking miracle to actually finish with Uncharted 4. There's no way you bring it back. And then, and then I ended The Lost Legacy with, like, can, like, every 2 years, can you just make another $40 Uncharted game starring Chloe and Nadine? Can you just... The Lost Legacy 2, can we just keep this going? I don't need an Uncharted 5, and I kind of don't want an Uncharted 5. I want these, though. I want smaller, focused, crazy, big action, blockbuster Uncharted games that don't have to be the big boundary-pushing AAA things. I think, like, this space that they found for The Lost Legacy is so ripe for more games like that, like, fucking keep making them, please. I want them.
I know, and there's so many other factors that go into this, in part because Naughty Dog can only make so many games.
It's true.
But they're just so good at this, and I feel like The Lost Legacy puts more gas in a tank we thought was empty. And not empty because the games ever got bad, just because Uncharted 4 got to a point where you're like, this was Nathan Drake's story, they finished it perfectly, there's no more to tell. Well, you had this character, Chloe, and you brought her out, and you made basically Uncharted 5, but with Chloe. And it's like, okay, I don't want that to be the end. I don't want there to be only one Chloe Uncharted game, especially when it is this fucking good. I would play these to the end of time.
Yeah.
And
also, Sully wasn't in it, and it's like, I want to see Sully hang out with Chloe and Nadine. Like, come on. Like, what a great fucking, like, Three Musketeers that would be.
Yeah. Eventually do the scene where they all go to dinner at Nate and Elena's house, and they're not doing it, they are out of the adventure game.
Oh my god, that would be the fucking best scene to, like, open the next Uncharted, or to end the next, if they'd made another one, that it is Nate and Elena at home, like, Elena's pregnant or something, it's like, you did sort of like setting up the epilogue to Uncharted 4. And then you just have Chloe and Sam and Sully and Nadine all come in, just being like, man, that shit was fucking crazy. Like, I didn't even realize there were other lost cities that we didn't even know about. Like, they were so lost, they weren't even hinted at in mythology. It's like, remember when Godzilla showed up? Yeah, that was nuts, and I climbed off of him and got him to fire his atomic breath at, like, the villain. Man, that was some whack shit. And just see Nathan be like, oh, no. Come on, guys, like, I'm basically in rehab here.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Or just, like, make the adventure crazy enough that Nathan looks at it and is like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good over here with my family or something. But yeah, like, I'm at a point where I don't ever want this to end. It's so good. If this is all it is, hey, it was a phenomenal run.
Yeah.
And it's not like this ends on some huge cliffhanger, but it does leave you feeling like Naughty Dog is good enough at this, and I do not think at all they have tapped every last bit of potential out of this. It feels like they've got more to say, maybe. And
yeah, if anything, I feel like The Lost Legacy sort of proves how durable and formidable like the core formula of Uncharted is.
Yep.
That like it can be completely removed from the ongoing developing like character drama of Nathan Drake and his like sort of supporting cast and totally support a game and be a fantastic, brilliant, like one of the best games of the year.
Yeah.
It's like and that's a really remarkable thing. It's pretty rare in games that you get to see that.
Now, it is always rumored that at some point Sony will just keep making these without Naughty Dog.
Right.
And I don't really want to see that.
No.
We saw what happened when that happened with Halo, and that was with some Bungie people on board.
Yeah.
And Halo is a dead series walking. So I don't ever want that to happen with Uncharted, really.
Yeah, like I think like the magic formula for that is so delicate that it would be like you just need like the right kind of writing and the right kind of pacing and to get the right kinds of performances to like sell you on those characters in that world.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, it doesn't matter how much fun the combat is. Like you have to buy into it to enjoy the combat, I think.
And, I think some people sometimes, I did not realize personally just how big Uncharted is for Sony. I was looking at the sales numbers for Uncharted 4. It sold 10 million copies already. That's nuts.
No,
it's hugely so like there is every incentive in the world to keep this thing going, and we'll see what happens with it. I would not mind if Naughty Dog decided to carve out some time. They don't need to update the engine or anything right now.
Exactly, yeah. Like
Maybe
just
when-
like an extra mechanic, a small improvement or two.
And maybe when we get to like the PlayStation 5 one day, they have to do something bigger. But yeah, I do think it would be worth doing one or two more like this, and just it is so good. I'll be interested to see how the Lost Legacy sells and all this, because this was also like a total accident that they started out developing like basically Uncharted Left Behind, like a 2-hour thing, and then it's like, oh fuck, we made an 8-hour game.
I mean, it's very much the ODST parallel of like ODST started out its life as a small expansion, and then they're like, fuck, this ended up being a full like 8-hour campaign.
But I mean, here's the thing: if we're sitting here this jazzed about it, I have to imagine there's a team of people at Naughty Dog feeling the same way.
Yeah.
That they like went gold on this and then felt like, well, fuck, I don't want to face never making an Uncharted game again.
Yeah.
But who knows? I will play whatever Naughty Dog makes in the future. The rest of my life, they have bought that loyalty over these last 10 years.
And I saw a really kind of crazy figure the other day that like I didn't see what the specific numbers of what the Lost Legacy sold, but it was just one of the only reliable sources of video game sales we get is like the UK sales charts, because video game sales are fucking weird in the United States for a lot of reasons. But apparently, Uncharted: The Lost Legacy is the 6th PlayStation 4 exclusive to top the UK charts this year, which is fucking nuts.
It's why this has been such a crazy year for video games, is that Sony over here has had just hit after hit after hit after hit, and then Nintendo over here has had hit after hit after hit. And if you have overlap in those audiences like me, it's overwhelming. I
mean, even if you don't have a Switch like me,
yes,
I can't fucking keep up with it.
No, you're
right.
right.
I just got Yakuza Kiwami, and Destiny 2 comes out in a week.
I know, it's absolutely. Here's Sean. I keep like my running tally throughout the year of games I've played. How stressed are you about the top 10 this year?
Fuck yeah!
I'm already at a point where I know I'm going to leave off games I loved, like just flat out loved.
Yeah.
So, and we're not even. We have so many games left. I think I was counting, because I also have a count like for personal timeline and like financial reasons. How many games am I getting the rest of the year? And I have like 8 left to go. It's nuts.
Yeah. Like I still haven't played Hellblade, because it's like I was thinking like, oh, Hellblade will be easy to get because it's not that long and it's only like $30, and then I realized I bought like 5 games this month that are like $30 or $40. I spent more money on games this month than I usually do in a month, and none of them were full price fucking games, and I didn't even buy Hellblade.
Yeah, so it's a thing. Anyway, well, what a year for games. This is, I think, in terms of a year for games that like I have followed closely, the best of my whole life. And I know we said that last year, but this is like 2016 on crack.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy, and I would have never expected that I would have enjoyed Uncharted: The Lost Legacy as much as I did.
No, I wouldn't have either, because I also I think that again, Sony did not show this game off a ton, which I think was smart. But the little demos they did show, I don't think they picked like the best moments from the game to show off. So I was kind of thinking, well, that looks kind of whatever. And then you play it, and oh man, cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah, it was very much when they first showed it off that real like, oh, you're making another Uncharted thing feel, and then it's like, I actually played it like, please make more Uncharted things.
I know.
How do you keep on putting me in this place? I feel like I should be the last person that would be in this place. I didn't even like these games that much the first time I played them. How now I'm like crazy obsessed with them.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this. My quick Uncharted rankings. It's always been the easiest thing in the world for me because I think each one is better than the one before it. But now I have to figure out where to slot in the Lost Legacy.
Yeah.
I think Uncharted 4 is still the best one overall. I would put the Lost Legacy just under that.
Yeah.
I think I think they are. I think the Uncharted 4s, if we want to call them that, are the best two.
I think I would probably agree with that. Like Uncharted 3, I really love.
I love that one too, but yeah.
I think I would probably agree with that.
Yeah, I just... Because you kind of get the best of both worlds with the Lost Legacy.
Yeah.
So, anyway, let's move on and talk about Twin Peaks. How do we make this transition, Sean?
Uncharted The Lost Legacy was really good, and so was Twin Peaks. Speaking of things that were good, Twin Peaks The Return, episode 16.
Well, here, I'll say this. So, there's a line at one point in this episode. Okay, spoilers, because I'm going to spoil the shit out of this episode in a second here.
Absolutely.
But let me see if I can find the line that I'm looking for. Okay, there's a point in Twin Peaks Part 16, and again, you don't want it spoiled. Spoilers.
Yeah.
Where a fully awake Agent Dale Cooper
Uh-huh.
says to his new family, "You've made my heart so full." Uncharted The Lost Legacy made my heart very full, and so did this episode of Twin Peaks.
Okay, that's way too much work to put in to make a fucking segue, Jonathan. Jesus Christ.
Well, we've segued. Now we'll talk about Twin Peaks.
Okay.
Sean, how full...
I climbed at least 2 mountains and toppled 2 peaks in Uncharted games, and so Twin Peaks.
Sean, how full did this episode make your heart?
Oh, God.
How great was this?
It's just unbelievable.
Okay, so
Even as someone who is a steadfast, and I still, until the series is over, I, don't take anything for granted. This could be an extended dream sequence. Who knows? As a dead, Dougie Jones never wakes up candidate, I did have a really good time when Dougie Jones woke up.
There's so much to talk about in this episode. But yeah, Dougie Jones woke up, and I love that there wasn't even, at the moment, a ton of fanfare around it.
Yeah, it wasn't like I feel like, of course, Twin Peaks would do this, but a normal TV show would do the, build up, and at the last, scene of the episode is Dougie sitting up and then giving a look into the camera or something that's very clearly I'm Dale Cooper, and then cutting to black. It does not do that.
No, it's his first scene in the episode, and what that does is that makes this, again, a full unified episode of television where you get to have him wake up, and then we get to spend time with that for about an hour, you know? And there's a scene with Evil Cooper at the beginning, there's the scene with Audrey at the end. Most of the middle of this episode is all Coop all the time.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the specifics, but boy howdy, have David Lynch and Mark Frost not lost a beat writing for this guy.
Yeah.
Boy howdy, has Kyle MacLachlan not lost a beat playing him. It was eerie how much he felt like Dale Cooper of 25 years ago.
Exactly, yeah.
When he turns and says, "I am the FBI," chills. And also applause.
Yeah.
But it was oh my God, you look... obviously Kyle MacLachlan looks older, but in that moment, it felt like he hadn't been gone a day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and it's one of my favorite things about how they handle the waking up thing, is that, it's just he's awake and he's just going, full 120%, and he remembers everything about being Dougie, he's still that person. And I like how clear that bridge is between Dale and the sort of comatose Dougie Jones. But once he's Dale Cooper and he has his purpose, he just goes for it 120% the way that Dale Cooper did in Twin Peaks, and sort of brings out things about that character that I kind of forgotten was the feel of that character and how he operates, because we're so used to seeing him in this very familiar setting and story over the course of the 2 seasons of Twin Peaks, and here he just feels so fresh again because it's he's got a fully new purpose, and he's just I'm going to fucking do it, and I'm going to make use of all the attachments and everything I have gained in my weird life as Dougie Jones to accomplish what I need to do.
This is the 3rd episode in a row that I think is just a straight up fucking masterpiece.
Yeah.
And when we talked with part 14, this is one of the best 3 episodes. Part 15, this is one of the best 4 episodes. Part 16, it's better than the last 2. Yeah. It's each one of these, it's just clearly in this home stretch. It's the best version of what we have said and hoped for all along, which is that Lynch and Frost know the story they are telling. They are telling it very meticulously. And now that we're down the home stretch, good God, the payoff is off the charts amazing.
Oh, yeah. It's
And also, you get to the end of this episode, and there are a lot of balls left in the air for the last 2 hours of this thing. I have 100% confidence it's going to be exactly right.
Yeah.
You know? I'm not going into this with any of the sense of like, oh, there's too much for the next 2 hours. It feels like they know what they're doing. This was the right episode to be the penultimate episode, and we are going into the finale in the exact right place.
Yeah. And going back to something you said earlier, like, it is just such a joy that you get to basically spend this whole episode with Cooper. Like you don't have to have that, like, weird, like, tension of, like, oh, they kind of introduced him, and then you have to wait a week to be like, are they going to do this right? Is this going to work? Like, how are you going to pull this off? It's like you get to see, like, yes, no, like, they know exactly what they're doing with this character, and you get to spend time with Dale Cooper and get to have that kind of, like, tension relief here. This, like, last breath of, like, oh man, I feel so safe and comfortable with this person. And then, of course, like, the episode ends with one of, like, the more disturbing, like, psychologically disturbing scenes of Twin Peaks Third Turn to, like, set up, like, now we're going to have to go into this shit, but at least we have our light of Dale Cooper with us this time.
Because this episode is all about payoff. It brings at least 3 characters to very definitive endings.
Oh, absolutely.
And it sets up, I mean, it has all this payoff on everything in Vegas and the Dougie Jones stuff. It has, I think we'll probably see Janie E and Sonny Jim again next week, but this is effectively their denouement, I think, and their coda, and we'll see what happens next week. You've got Evil Cooper being set up for whatever his final moves are. Yeah. We know where Audrey is, and I think a sense of how she's going to play into sort of, at least thematically, where things are going, if not...
It sort of recontextualizes a lot of the scenes we have seen with Audrey, and, like, gives you a lot of ideas on how to approach those now.
I also think,
there's a killer fucking scene with the FBI that, like, sets them up.
Oh, God, yes. Jesus.
The next sequence.
It's crazy. This is an episode so good, it's almost easy to forget Laura Dern giving, like, career best work.
Yeah.
Laura Dern is always great. That was just a particularly great Laura Dern scene. So, boy howdy, this was a fucking episode of TV. And, man, oh man, let's talk about it.
All right.
Where
do we start, Jonathan? You've got the notes.
I do have the notes. I'm at 55 pages on my notes document for Twin Peaks. I'll have to share this online when we're done next week. But anyway, we start with what you have called the Evil Cooper shot, which is the dark, winding highway at night, shrouded in darkness.
I feel like whenever you see this shot, you're in for something real good on this show.
Oh yeah, because and like the way the camera moves. Lynch also does this later in the episode when Good Coop is driving through Las Vegas, where it's like the car's POV, like when you're playing Forza and you go into that weird POV.
Yeah, where it's like on the hood or something weird.
Right.
You're like, what am I even looking at?
Yeah, like I don't quite know how he mounted the camera, but it's like it's super stable and seemingly disembodied. And then what we have is Richard and Dart Cooper are driving together, and they pull onto a dirt road, and there's this great long shot that will eventually become Jerry Horn's POV as they pull.
Right.
He comes in here.
He comes in because we haven't seen him in a couple of episodes. We even get a little check-in with him.
I predicted this almost to a T, that his story would, like, at some point climax with him running into someone encountering the other dimension, and that's what happened. I thought it would happen with the sheriff's people, but instead it happens with Evil Coop here. But yeah, so they're checking the coordinates, and then they stop at this fork in the road, and they kind of look curiously at their surroundings, and then there's this great shot where he flips on the truck's top lights, and then we have that long shot panning over to see the lights turning and focusing on this rock on the hill. And Cooper sends Richard over and says, I'm looking for a place. 3 people have given me coordinates to that place. 2 of the coordinates match. What would you do, Richard? I'd check the 2 that match. You're a very bright young man, and we're very close to the 2 that match. It's right up there. And he convinces him to go up there. In the midst of this, Jerry Horn shows up, still on his drug adventures, and he goes, people? And he's on this, like, adjacent hill, pulls out his binoculars and holds them the wrong way so everything looks further off, and just goes...
like, he spends, like, 3 minutes, like, slowly doing it, and you know that he's going to put them on the wrong way, but, like, the incredibly deliberate way he does it and then holds it up to only one eye.
Yep.
It's very good.
And he says, dear God, which is great. And at this point I wrote in all caps, I knew this was going somewhere. And I'd like to point out, literally every strand in Twin Peaks The Return has gone somewhere. Mm-hmm. At the 16 episodes in, including Jerry Horn's drug trip, which no one would have blamed Lynch and Frost if it was just a comedic interlude.
Yeah.
But even it kind of intersected somewhere. All right, so more ominous music. They get up towards the rock, And Cooper makes an interesting line here. He says, "I'm 25 years your senior. Take this and get up there. It'll beep when you're close and make a continuous tone when you're on it. Let me know what you find." And we'll have to talk about, because there's some controversy around, was this a good payoff for Richard? I love that Richard's whole payoff is, he gets with his dad, and he kind of, in a weird, dark way, wants to impress him, and it leads to Richard climbing up onto that rock. A lot of great cinematography here. There's this shot of his shadow on the rock, which will be repeated where later when he gets electrocuted, it's his shadow disappearing on the ground. So there's a bunch of great stuff there. And eventually the device is beeping. He gets there, and out of nowhere is just electrified. I wrote that it looks like he has become a firework, like a sparkler, until his body just disappears. And then Cooper says, "Oh, goodbye, my son." And that's how David Lynch does the formal reveal that Richard is Dark Coop's son.
Yes, thus endeth Dick Horn.
I love this!
It's really good, yeah. I understand the sort of the issues that some people have with whether or not that's a good payoff to the character, but there's something so appropriate about it to me of that because for Evil Coop, it just gives you the sense of Dick Horn is not anything special to him. No. He probably has. I mean, we know, because it's something that comes up in the Laura Dern scene later, we know he has raped multiple women, and probably, way more than we know about, and probably has several children all over the place. And I think that's something you kind of get that sense of, whether literally, with Dick Horn, or figuratively, the presence of Bob or Evil Coop and what he symbolizes is sort of causing the world to fracture apart into kind of chaos and Armageddon. And so it feels appropriate to me that Dick Horn is just one small piece of that. Why would he be concerned? He's just one small agent of the chaos. Nothing that is that important.
No, I feel I love this as an ending for Richard Horn, because what he is ultimately is one of the many arbiters of evil that trace back up to Dark Coop.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's Lynch saying all evil starts and ends with this version of Kyle MacLachlan. But it is in this story, this good versus evil story we're kind of telling, he is that embodiment, and it all goes back to him. And Richard was a splinter of him out in the world. And the confrontation next week needs to be with Dark Cooper. So just from basic... And again, I think the scripts for Twin Peaks The Return should be studied in film school for just basic narrative structure. Because as weird as it is, it has the basics down so pat you don't even notice it most of the time.
Yeah.
But as we are heading towards the climax, it needs to be focused on who is our core antagonist. It is Evil Cooper, and getting Richard out of the picture here in a way that gives us more narrative information and wackiness is exactly right.
And sets up Evil Cooper as more of a villain. The fact that he doesn't recognize anything about some sort of fucking familial bond between him and Richard Horn, which I think a lot of people probably suspected would happen, felt could have been a setup from the last episode when they kind of hooked up. You just realize no, he's had probably a mild curiosity in this kid, but is perfectly willing to just let him die, which I think it just feels appropriate to get that shade of the character and to sort of really 100% clarify he has no interest in any positive human element at all, whether it be family or love or anything.
Yeah, he has some goal that we are still at least partially in the dark about. And there are 2 coordinate locations he's been given. One of them was this trap. He has now eschewed that trap, and now he is going for whatever the real location is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the setup for the finale, and Good Cooper clearly knows what's up.
Yeah.
So, and... in some ways, when we'll talk later about, the whole Dougie arc and all this. Part of why Cooper had to be Dougie for 16 episodes is because if Cooper were just awake and out in the world, he'd have solved all of this by now.
Sure,
He's too good an agent, and there's something about, especially once you've set him up that way in old Twin Peaks, all these disparate threads, Cooper is the mystery in this show. That is intentionally the story they were telling. It's not stalling. Cooper had to wake up when he woke up because now he's in that position. He was the mystery. Anyway... the last thing to say about this scene, 2 things, is that after all the electrocution, Jerry starts banging his binoculars and goes, "Bad, bad, bad binoculars!" Which is a great moment. I love Jerry. And then back at the truck, Cooper sends a smiley emoji and the word "all" to Diane, but we will see that later.
Yeah.
So, we don't know it's Diane in the moment.
But I think most people probably suspected. Yes. He's been texting with somebody a lot.
Yes. And my last notes on this scene were just holy fucking shit.
Yeah.
All right. Then we have a scene at Dougie's neighborhood. A vehicle approaches. It's Hutch and Chantal.
Yes, the wayward assassins.
Yep. They're eating some junk food, watching the house. A few black cars pull up, and we see that the FBI is also looking around. And so they are on the correct Dougie's trail. Everyone here is looking for Dougie. Meanwhile, we're in the hospital. Dougie is on a ventilator. A bunch of wires hooked up to him. Janie and Sonny Jim are sitting with him. She's stroking his hand. Bushnell is there, Dougie's boss. We learn that Dougie is in a coma. Janie is worried he'll be in it for years. Sonny Jim asks if it has anything to do with electricity, which in this case it very much does, as Bushnell points out. Anyway, and then great detail is the Mitchum brothers come in with a comically large basket of flowers saying, "Get well soon, Dougie." And they have their 3 pink ladies with them bringing a bunch of miniature finger sandwiches, Candy explains. And they want a house key so they can go stock Dougie's house up too. So just a great little moment here where I love like this weird extended family. Dougie has maybe, I would say inadvertently, but Cooper seems awfully aware of what he has done. So maybe inadvertently built.
I mean, it's the kind of thing that all the, little sort of like breadcrumb trails that the Red Room visions or whatever the fuck they were led him to was having Batlin Bud Bushnell on his side and then getting the Mitchum brothers on his side and like dedicated to this guy so that when he wakes up he has all these tools available to him and also has like righted all these wrongs in the world and sort of uncovered the hearts of gold that the Mitchum brothers have and all that stuff.
We'll talk about all that later. It's so great. We have a brief cut at this point to Gordon Cole in the hotel, and he's in a room with a bunch of devices, and they're whirring and beeping, and obviously it's an interesting thematic cut because it's all this like machinery, and then we cut back to Dougie's monitor beeping. I don't even know what the stuff Gordon Cole was looking at was, really, but maybe we'll see more of that. It's an interesting little like thematic cut they do.
Yeah, that also sets up us going back there later.
Right, yeah. So Sonny Jim has to pee, so Janie takes him to the little boy's room. Of course Janie calls it that, because she would. Yeah. Bushnell gets a call. It's the FBI. They're looking for Dougie, and apparently they're going to be there in a few minutes. And Bushnell comes over and kind of examines Dougie more closely. This is setting up the awakening that is soon to happen. Meanwhile, though, we get a scene that is easy to overlook in this episode because there's so much other good stuff. But we get the climax of the Hutch and Chantel story at the house. So the Mitchum brothers are there delivering food, and the FBI is there kind of watching. And then a big white, so they get the big white limo comes and they do all that. But then after all of that, the van pulls away. The Mitchums are like in Dougie's house, like getting it ready because they love Dougie so much. And I love that they love Dougie so much. Then this little white car, which says on the side, Zawoski Accounting Incorporated. Who knows if that will be important?
Yeah.
Pulls up to Hutch and Chantel. And this bald guy gets out and confronts them. Says, "You're in my driveway." And Chantel, being who she is, shouts back, "We're not even close to your fucking driveway, asshole. Go fuck yourself." And he goes, "All right, I'll move my car." And then he just starts crashing into their car. And Chantel is enraged and like shoots at the guy. And then he gets out a fucking Uzi.
Yeah.
And starts shooting. And Tim Roth gets out a shotgun, and it is completely ridiculous. Chantel like hits the guy's car and almost kills him, but then he gets back, completely just obliterates Chantel, and then obliterates Hutch too. And then the Mitchums are out there with their guns. And the kicker to this whole scene is they're like in cover watching, and they go, "What the fuck kind of neighborhood is this? People are under a lot of stress, Bradley."
Yeah.
And I think that like is such a great kicker to the entire Vegas thread of Twin Peaks: The Return. People are under a lot of stress. And so the Mitchums just go back in their house like, we need to wait this out. And then finally the FBI come and arrest the maniac accountant.
Yeah.
And
who just like very politely just like puts his gun on the ground, puts his hands above his head, like he doesn't resist arrest at all. This is like a very calm reaction to a dude who just freaked the fuck out, tried to shove this like van like out of his driveway, and then pulled a fucking submachine gun out and blew them away. Because it's also like it's an extended sequence too, because he shoots through like their window and has to take cover behind his car, and the car gets shoved and he falls over, and then the Chantel's and the Hutch, their van drives by, and the guy gets back up, reloads his gun, and just fires like 100 bullets into the back of the van and kills them all. It's just like, what the fuck?
It's another of the very subtle but present like undercurrent in Twin Peaks: The Return of random American citizens being extremely well armed, and gun violence.
Yeah, which I'm curious if that is going to come up next episode.
I don't know.
My gut kind of tells me that was just what that was, but there's a chance that maybe he was an assassin or something.
But it's a great ending to that whole like thread of the show.
Yeah,
because I've called this the Mitchum Brothers stuff and the Hutch stuff. All of that feels like, to me, David Lynch was up late one night surfing channels and saw a double feature of Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction and decided, and I'm sure he had never seen Quentin Tarantino before, and then he decided, I want to riff on this in my new Twin Peaks series.
Oh, this stuff's pretty good!
Let's do our own version of it!
Yeah.
And basically just told everyone to like... Because Tim Roth is, one of the big Tarantino actors. Just, like, do a Quentin Tarantino movie. And this is totally plays to me like a really good send-up of a Tarantino shootout, you know? Like, it all feels like it's in that vein. It is, because David Lynch, especially in the later phase of his career, I would say, like, Mulholland Drive to now, loves doing these, like, genre riffs. And this is totally one of those. And I just love it. It also kind of does feel like, we had Hutch and Chantel out there cleaning up loose ends. Now we've got to clean them up. Let's just go for it.
Yeah.
So they got that Showtime money, man. Do a full shootout. That's great. But that's a hell of a scene. And then we're back to Dougie in the hospital. And this is a great detail. Bushnell is there kind of with him alone. And then he hears this mysterious ringing tone. And if I'm not mistaken, it's the same sound that Ben Horne and Beverly hear at the Great Northern.
Yeah, I made that connection as well.
Yeah, which is a really interesting little detail. He can't find the source, so he goes out in the hallway wandering off. And now that Dougie is alone, a chair in the room turns into the Red Room and Mike, the one-armed man, and Dougie just gets up, rips the ventilator out, which would hurt a lot when he does it. And Mike asks, "You're awake?" 100%. Oh, fucking man.
Yeah.
What was your reaction when he sits up and says 100%?
I think it was just like mouth agape, just like, oh shit, they're doing it. Like, because again, it's the thing of like, they were probably like, I had my joke about like, oh, they were never going to do it. He was going to become Dale Cooper at some point in some capacity, but like I didn't expect it to just be that like snap transformation, and he's just there immediately, and like you said, eerily immediately recognizable as that character just from the get go. Like that, and like 120% is. And
it's weirdly an uphill climb they have to make because Kyle MacLachlan has played like 4 other characters on this show over the last 16 hours.
Yeah, to the point that you've kind of forgotten Dale Cooper other than in like the little clips of Fire Walk With Me we've seen.
Right. Well, he's like won the scene in that movie. Yeah, so anyway, in this scene, we get a bunch of exposition because Mike goes, finally, which, speaking for the audience, says, the other one, he didn't go back in, he's still out, take this, and he passes the green ring to Dougie, or I kept calling him Dougie for like another page or so in my notes, but to Cooper, I guess we have to call him. And so Cooper takes the green ring, so that's going to come into play, and Cooper asks, do you have the seed? Whatever that is. And Mike shows him a little gold ball, which we have seen before. Yeah. I think the actual Douglas Jones turned into that little thing.
Yes.
And we'll see it again later on with Laura Dern, Diane.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So shows him the little gold ball, and Cooper then like pulls some of his own hair out, passes it to Mike, and says, I need you to make another one. And that's the end of that interaction. So a ton to dissect there. So for one, Cooper, throughout all of this, was never unaware of what was going on. He knew the stakes. He knew, like, the rules. He knows more than any of us. Again, a reason why he kind of had to be comatose is because he knew all of this. The mystery is about him, and he's the answer to all of it. So there is this weird thing with doubling, and Cooper knows the rules of this. He has the green ring because he knows this is how he can defeat Evil Cooper, which we knew from last week with the assassin. So all of that is very fascinating. What will happen next? Who knows? But there is the hint here that he's asking to make another, like, clone, basically.
Yeah. And
I'm curious what that's for. The most obvious fan theory is that he will make a real Douglas Jones to, like, go back and live with the family. Maybe, maybe not. I think there's also, it could be some part of his endgame with Evil Cooper. I don't like to speculate because you never know, but it does leave a lot of doors open.
And one of my favorite things about it is, like, it just sets up immediately that, like, while this is very recognizably the same person of Special Agent Dale Cooper that you know from old Twin Peaks, he has access to all this knowledge that old Dale Cooper didn't have, that old Dale Cooper wanted to have, of like the Red Room and this other dimension and all these weird arcane mystic rules that, old Dale Cooper would go on and on about Tibet and how like he has these dreams and stuff and is kind of like flirting on the edges of this sort of like supernatural world. And here he's just utterly a part of it in the same way that like it felt like Philip Jeffries was. That, who's another person that was a normal FBI agent at some point that then turned into a giant, like, ornate teapot that belches numbers. Yes. Which is like, maybe Dale Cooper's transformation is not quite as extreme as that, but he does feel like he is utterly integrated into this other world in a way that none of the other normal human characters are. In a way that, like, Evil Cooper is. And Evil Cooper understands the rules of that world and can go to the convenience store and interacts with the dirty bearded man and all that stuff. We've seen him, like, very consciously understand that world in a way that, like, the FBI kind of has to tiptoe around and sort of, like, decipher all these clues and sort of figure out some of what the rules are and sort of half guess at them and stare in awe at these hell portals. And Dale Cooper's just, like, wakes up, looks at a vision of Mike in the Red Room, like, in a small form in the chair, and is just like, here, take my hair, make another one of those things. Bye. It's like, okay, shit, yeah, you know all of this stuff.
He's enlightened. He spent 25 years in the Red Room, and he is now like a transcendent being. Yeah. He's become like Buddha Cooper or something.
Exactly.
And he has a mission. So then Janie E. and Sonny Jim come back in, totally shocked, and we have his first words to his family. Hello, Sonny Jim. Hello, Janie E. And it's great. At one point, he asks Bushnell for some sandwiches. He's like, I'm very hungry. Give me some of those finger sandwiches. All of that is great. He's saying he's got to get out of here, and Janie says, I don't know if that's a good idea. And Cooper says, it's a good idea. And then the nurse is checking his vitals and goes, it is a good idea, which is wonderful. And then the kicker to this whole scene for me is they're out in the hallway, and because Cooper says, go get the car, and Sonny Jim says, Dad sure is talking a lot. Yeah, he sure is, Sonny Jim. Yeah.
This is like kind of one of the few times that any character has ever acknowledged directly just how weird Dougie was.
Yep.
It's like everyone has just sort of quietly accepted it, and now that he's talking, it's like, he is talking a lot, huh?
Yep. So we have the last scene between Bushnell and Cooper here, where he says, Bushnell, I'm going to need the 32 snub nose you wear in the shoulder holster under your left arm. And that's one of those moments where I just wrote in my notes, like, it's Cooper. Yeah. Holy crap. But it's great. He has all these instructions. He asks to get the Mitchum brothers on the phone. He calls them and he says, there's this, and then there's this moment where we cut to the Mitchum brothers, and we get the phone conversation where he says, you're going to protect my family at the casino, and I need a plane to Spokane, Washington. Yeah. And then as the Mitchum brothers say, I wonder what Dougie's up to now, we start with the Twin Peaks theme.
Yeah.
Falling, the main theme. And all of this is falling into place, where Cooper has this plan. It's all coming together. And then we have the last scene with Bushnell where he says, I have a feeling a man named Gordon Cole will call here. If he does, read him this message, and like hands him a little piece of paper. Shakes Bushnell's hand and says, you're a fine man, Bushnell Mullins. I will not soon forget your kindness and decency.
This is another just like pure Dale Cooper line.
And then the purist.
Yeah.
What about the FBI?
I am the FBI.
And the way they shoot it, like, David Lynch is so aware of the iconography of original Twin Peaks, even though I think this is from an episode he didn't direct, but it's the shot, like side shot on Cooper. He doesn't literally do the thumbs up, but it's basically the shot that launched 1,000 GIFs of Cooper looking to the camera and giving the thumbs up as he says, I am the FBI.
Yeah.
So fantastic. Again, like, Lynch is a total experimental filmmaker on Twin Peaks: The Return. He is also a consummate crowd pleaser, because if this were playing in a movie theater with like 200 people, there would be raucous applause at that line. It's so good,
especially because we had to work for it.
We did.
We didn't get it in episode 4. We got it in episode fucking 16.
Indeed. So they get in the car. Dougie says, "Move over, I'll drive."
Yeah.
Don't worry, Janie E. And then the Twin Peaks theme is playing under all of this. And he's cruising down the road, asking how to get to the casino. And we have the great kicker with Sonny Jim saying, Dad can drive. Really good. And I wrote in my notes, Janie looks more hot for him than ever.
Yeah.
Which is very true. Oh, man. All of this stuff is so good. There's a few more scenes with Cooper here, and we'll get to those in a second. But I think this is probably a good time to address, because you mentioned, like, the waiting made it so worth it. So let's talk for a moment about the arc of Mr. Douglas Jones and his reawakening now into Cooper, and it took 16 episodes. I wouldn't change a moment of it.
Oh, no. Yeah. It's perfect. Like, it's something that it just feels like it's such a confident setup for the finale that I'm so curious to see, like, in more, like, thematic sense, what is Dale Cooper going to be for this show in its conclusion? Because I feel like Dougie was this lens through which we, like, occupied this weird, like, apathy and this weird sort of criticism of modernity through this, like, vacuous man who just wandered through life, and yet him just being there, sort of like parroting what was happening around him, was kind of like the nicest person around in Las Vegas, and that like strange sense of that sort of surreal story of, again, like this sort of vacuous entity that in his vacuousness somehow is noble and somehow brings out the best in the people around him. What does him being like filled with this like brimming personality of Dale Cooper do for this show going forward? Because I think like Dougie was the heart of Twin Peaks: The Return, and like he has been the heart of Twin Peaks: The Return since episode 3 all the way up to episode 16. He has been like our rock, you know, that we haven't necessarily checked in with him heavily every single episode, but even in like the one episode where the only shot we saw of him was him playing catch with Sonny Jim, that was like one of the most memorable shots of that entire episode.
And he is the rock, and he's the rock in so many ways, because you have so many tones being channeled through Douglas Jones. You have the high comedy, you have some really sweet and tender stuff, you have satire, you have the metaphysical, you have so many things going through this. I think it is so much also one of the thematic linchpins of the show, and I think it has been entertaining and interesting throughout. And yes, the wait was worth it, because I think the other thing is that, and I think it is worth it to consider, that what we want is not always what we need out of entertainment.
Exactly.
And if you told me a year ago, we're getting 18 episodes of new Twin Peaks, what are you most excited for? And I might have said 18 hours of Dale Cooper. Most people would have said that.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. With everything Lynch and Frost wanted to do with this show, Dale Cooper would have overshadowed all of that.
Oh, yeah.
He's too big a personality, it's too kind of big a performance, and there's too many other things that were on their mind. And sometimes you have to look at, like, okay, we have this great character, but he's like, it's a sometimes food. You can't have him all the time, or else it's going to overshadow everything else. Yeah. And so the invention of Douglas Jones and how organically that felt important to the story and allowed Kyle MacLachlan to do all these other wonderful things and the show to walk all these other wonderful paths, including those that had nothing to do with Kyle MacLachlan, I think that's really important, and it will make these last 3 hours where we have had and will have Dale Cooper feel all the more impactful and important. And I also like that this episode does a really good job contextualizing it, that Cooper lived all of this. He felt the love, he felt the joy, the excitement, and he is ready when he wakes up. And it feels very much like a metaphor for the show, which is, or for the viewing experience, that Cooper is tacitly telling us in these moments where we realize he remembers everything, that this wasn't a time waster. This wasn't a time suck. I remember this. This all made my heart full. You as a viewer, it should have made your heart full as well. Even if you wanted to get to me faster, even if I wanted to wake up faster, this is how it had to be. And I think the show kind of tacitly acknowledging all of that is part of what makes it all feel like it just lands it so perfectly here.
Yeah, like it recognizes that everything that we went through with Dougie was valuable. Mm-hmm. That we were like, while you do get this nice reward of this like nostalgia hit, this like just deep fucking nostalgia bump you get from Dale Cooper showing up, like we had to have that experience with Dougie to get to this place and to explore the themes that we were exploring too, because like you said, Dale Cooper is way too overpowering of a character. He's too bright a shining light of hope, you know, that even the darkest like hours of the original Twin Peaks, he was there to sort of brighten you up. I mean, quite literally in the pilot, the first half of the pilot is like 40 minutes of people crying, and then Dale Cooper comes in and like doesn't necessarily save the day. You know, he doesn't solve the crime in the first episode, but he gives you this hope of like, we can be better and we can do better and we can do something about this problem. And having him absent and having this like shadow of him in Dougie was needed to sort of, I think, dive into this really, really dark place we have. Even when we have had like the comedy and we have had the lightness and we've had these heartwarming moments in Twin Peaks: The Return, you know, like with the last episode with Big Ed and all that stuff. like this has been a fundamentally incredibly dark, like dour, intense TV show. I mean, there's no greater evidence of that than episode 8. You know, that is like one of the most intense, or maybe the most intense episode or hour of television I've ever seen. Like coming out of that and having Dale Cooper be this like salve and this balm at the end of that experience, and recognizing that we had to go through all these steps and we had to go through all these stages to get to this place where now we can deal with it. Like, of course we had to go through the shit before we can deal with the shit. And it's like, it's an important element of the show.
The sort of semi-official title of this series is Twin Peaks: The Return.
Yeah.
And that's what it is about. It is about returning. And if Dale Cooper was there in episode 1, eating donuts and having damn good cherry pie,
giving a thumbs up,
it wouldn't be the return.
Uh-huh.
It would just be, we have returned.
Yeah.
And it is about that act of returning. And, when we talk also about Cooper being this big a character, this is also Lynch and Frost acknowledging he spent 25 years in the Red Room. The world has moved on 25 years.
Yeah.
He comes out of it with a different, sense of self. He is transcended and transcendent in so many ways. And that is not a sustainable character for 18 hours. But for 3, I'm excited.
Yeah. And it's something that I was so relieved when it became very evident that he remembered everything that happened.
Yes.
He had this relationship with Janie E and Sonny Jim, that he recognized that he loves these people. He considers them his family, because it felt so validating, I think, to like what we have been taking away from this show, that like the idea of a much more conventional TV show approach to that kind of story is like, oh, we have to have a whole episode dealing with like, oh, he doesn't know, like fish out of water, blah, 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 blah. That's like a lot of narrative work that I think a lot of TV shows would feel like obliged to do. And Twin Peaks Returns, like, no, like he had these experiences because the audience had these experiences in many ways. Like he needs to have had these experiences and to take them forward, because it does make like all that stuff and recontextualizes all the stuff that Dougie has done as being very actively productive in the show, not just in a thematic sense, but in a literal plot sense of that Dale Cooper would not be in the place he is in right now if he hadn't have done all the work he did as Dougie and found, the Mitchum brothers. And in a weird way, like the Mitchum brothers are like the stars of the second half of Twin Peaks: The Return, since they like kind of came in as characters. They've been such a like weirdly big part, particularly now. Like it feels like they are these really significant parts now.
It feels like at this point, like there was a conscious strategy by Cooper of like, if I just came out as Cooper, the FBI would find me and evil Cooper would find me. But if I lay low as this weird insurance agent in fucking Vegas, I can get all of my ducks in a row. And I
figure out how this wild and woolly world works in 2017.
So we will talk about more of this in a minute. But let's talk about the scene with Diane, which is what comes next. I think they smartly cut this in the middle of the episode, so we kind of get the warmth on either side.
Yeah.
But where Diane is at the bar, she gets that text from Evil Cooper, and there had been some ominous music. It cuts out, and she is visibly shaken. Like, the thing I wrote is like, oh, it looks like she is awakening, the same way that Cooper just did.
Yeah.
Only she isn't awakening confidently. She's awakening like she was drugged or something. And she's shuddering, breathing harshly, and she's saying, I remember. Texts back a series of numbers, says, I hope this works. And then she stands, we very importantly, we see inside her purse, which has American Spirit cigarettes and a gun.
Yeah.
And we need to know those two things are there. It's very Chekhovian in that sense. And then she gets up and starts walking. And again, the captions were very helpful to me here because they tell you what the songs are. And this is Muddy Magnolius' American Woman remix on the soundtrack, which is a harsh, thumping drum machine as she is like walking toward the camera.
That is the song that we were introduced to Dark Coop with. In the
oh
pilot.
Man, I forgot that.
That's the like the boom, boom, like that song. Yeah, that is that.
Wow,
like,
that is
crazy, weird, dark, fucked up version of that song. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Uh-huh.
That's a great connection. Anyway, so she's walking down the hall, and it's like she is a woman on a mission, and we have that song there. I also wrote down some of the lyrics because I thought they were like, oh, they're very key to who Diane is in this moment. It's the whole thing of, I know my worth and who I am. Hell will freeze over before I take orders from any old man. There's just like lyrics like that on the soundtrack that feel like, okay, Diane is on some kind of righteous fury. But she winds up First, she's in a red elevator. Looks like the Red Room. Then on the next floor, she's walking down the hall. Gordon Cole is in the room, and it's like we just cut to Gordon like disembodied, like we don't know where we are, but he like senses something. We have a lot of cuts back and forth, and then before she even gets to the door, he says, "Come in, Diane." Like he can sense it. She opens the door, comes in. Tammy, Albert, Gordon, all three of them are there. She's clutching her purse, which again we know has a gun, and the lyrics of that song pretty much told us she intends to use it, basically. And she says she's going to tell them about the story of the night Cooper came to visit her. Albert offers her a drink. She takes a sip, and then she puts a hand in the purse. And Gordon Cole looks a little worried, as we are. Cole is basically the audience proxy in this scene, but she pulls out the cigarettes. So I have that. Then we get the speech. And what a great moment from Laura Dern. I'll just read some of it here. 3-4 years after I stopped hearing from Cooper, I was still working at the Bureau. One night, no knock, no doorbell. That's the title of the episode also. Yeah. He just walked in. I was standing in my living room. I was just so happy to see him. I held him so close, and we sat on my sofa, started talking. I just wanted to hear everything about where he'd been and what he'd been doing. He only wanted to know about what had been going on at the Bureau. It felt like he was grilling me. And then he leaned in to kiss me. It had only happened once before. But as soon as his lips touched mine, something went wrong, and I felt afraid. And he saw the fear in me, and he smiled. And his face, that's when it started. And then the key words here, he raped me, he raped me. And obviously I'm not delivering this like Laura Dern, because it's a lot slower. But there was something about getting to, she just says, he raped me, that was incredibly powerful. Yeah. That it's so not sugar-coated. I also feel like it's not exploitative. They didn't film a gratuitous flashback showing it.
Exactly. Like, that's the exact thought I had in the moment of, like, this is so much better than how this is usually done, which is they do the big exploitative, like, oh, we're going to be so intense and dark and serious about, like, this really gritty rape scene. It's like, but you lose something in doing that, and you're, like, invoking something that maybe you're not really prepared to do.
You devalue the woman's experience. It's part of what you do. And here it's just, because it's like, this is kind of, it feels to me like this is the one moment we get the real Diane, or whatever is left of her. And for her to just say that is so powerful. She continues with her story that he took her to an old gas station. And then the electrical noise cue on the soundtrack now that we've always heard with, she's talking about the convenience store, I assume, that we've seen in previous episodes. And then she looks at the text again and starts saying some seemingly nonsensical stuff where she says, I'm in the sheriff's station. I'm in the sheriff's station. I sent him those coordinates. I'm in the sheriff's station because I'm not me. I'm not me. I'm not me. And then she pulls out the gun to fire at Albert, and he and Tammy both fire back first. And then it's very hard to explain what happens visually, but she like whooshes into thin air, disappearing. So
the weird, there's another scene of it coming of like the weird lo-fi effects of Twin Peaks. The Return is another thing that we have to be talked about of like how effective they are and how kind of primitive they are stylistically. Like the number of jump cuts there have been in this show is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get a scene in a second that I liken to the Terry Gilliam animation in Monty Python.
Sure, yeah.
We get a lot of that kind of stuff. So, yeah, Tammy says here, they're real. That was a real tulpa. And then Gordon says, sheriff's station? And I did not make the connection because in my heart I don't want to, but people pointed out the one person we know is in the sheriff's station is like the eyeless woman.
Right, Nido.
Yeah, Nido, which is very close, almost an anagram for the word Diane.
It's true.
But not quite.
Diano.
Yeah.
It's her brother, her twin brother.
Yeah. So people are thinking maybe that's the real Diane or something, which would be heartbreaking if true.
Yeah.
But we will find out. I mean, the Diane stuff here feels very important to me because, again, in this episode and in these last few episodes, Lynch and Frost have been closing off some plot threads, bringing some to a head, and I think one of the biggest thematic things in this show has been its presentation of misogyny.
Yeah.
And I think we've both said it's a critical presentation. It is not
glorifying it.
No, it isn't. It's not a glorification or a casual use of misogyny, I think is also an important way to frame it. And I think that's going to have to come into play. I don't think that's the last we've seen of Diane. It could be the last we've seen of Laura Dern. But I think the idea of Diane as a character, I think her evil Coop and good Coop, this is going to have to come together. And also whatever is happening with Audrey. Yeah. It feels like the two most important threads going into the finale to me are stopping whatever evil Coop is doing and also in some way rectifying or addressing the misogyny that has been wrought on some of these women. And there's three in particular. There's Becky, there's Audrey, and there's Diane. Yeah. And they are all kind of out there in the ether, and all three of their fates are very much up in the air. And I say they're two threads, but I think they're very, very related, because I think Lynch has a view of evil that is very closely tied to misogyny, which I think is a very apt way of looking at our world. So I'm very interested to see where this goes, but that's a scene.
Yeah. I also just think the sort of metaphor he engages with of the tulpa and of like this artificial sort of like fractured identity that is created through the abuse is really affecting to me, of just the idea of that what was done to Diane, like in this sort of like, you know, heightened metaphorical sense in like the weird world of Twin Peaks, but also like in a more literal, like victims of abuse, rape, sexual assault have like identity issues and have this issue of like not feeling like themselves, of feeling disembodied in many ways.
Or literally like feeling your body isn't yours anymore.
Exactly.
And it's literally not hers in this episode.
And there's something I found really powerful, and a lot of it goes to both the writing and then also Laura Dern's performance is just, you know, it's a real mic drop kind of acting moment.
And then we get her last scene, which is she's in the Red Room. We get that Angelo Badalamenti guitar strum.
Yeah.
She's sitting in a chair across from Mike. Mike says, "Someone manufactured you," and she just cuts to the chase and says, "I know. Fuck you." And that's it. Her jaw cracks. She rattles, her face disappears, smoke turns into smoke, and then this little gold cube floats through the air. Again, the best way I could describe it is it looks like one of those really crude Terry Gilliam animations from the original Monty Python shows.
Yeah. But it's happening to a person.
But it works. Like if they did like a really fancy CGI version of that, it wouldn't be as terrifying.
Yeah.
Because part of what's terrifying about all the fantastical metaphysical elements of this is it doesn't look like something that could or would happen in our world.
Yeah. There's no sort of like physical metaphor or relationship you can make to understand what is happening to her.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like her head turns into paper and folds and then is like this weird, like unearthly black fire. And you're like, what the fuck am I even looking at? It's very much like when Sarah Palmer took her face off and there's just a smiling face in there. Like, I don't know what I'm looking at anymore, but I am suitably terrified by it.
Holy crap. Anyway, then we go back to the Mustang Casino, and Cooper has brought his family, and we get the most touching scene, maybe of the whole show so far. It's fucking beautiful, where he tells them that he has to go away for a while, and he says, "But I want to tell you how much I've enjoyed spending time with both of you. You've made my heart so full." Another moment that I think is purely Dale Cooper, you know?
Yeah.
And Naomi Watts asks, "What are you saying?" And he says, "We're a family. Dougie, I will be back." And something I noticed here is Kyle MacLachlan's performance. He looks so confident and so sad in this moment. Like, he's not lying. Someone will be back. We just don't know if it's going to be him. And it's a beautifully sad moment. And it seems like Janie E. figures something out here where she says, "You're not Dougie?" And, Sonny Jim says, "No, you're my dad." And he embraces Sonny Jim and says, "I am your dad, Sonny Jim. I am your dad and I love you. I love you both." He's, tearing up at this point. He says, "You'll see me soon. I'll walk through that red door and I'll be home for good." And my note here was, God, I hope so. Please let that be the last scene of this series.
Yeah.
Because, and it does feel like that line isn't there for no reason. There's something about it that, I was tearing up here. This is a beautiful, beautiful scene. And just the idea of home and returning, and that this man knows he has this thing he has to go do.
Yeah.
But he does absolutely love these people. All the emotions that were exchanged between them are so real and so genuine. And, one of the things I wrote here in my notes is, this is what great dramatic payoff looks like.
Yeah.
There's a moment where, as he's leaving, Janie pulls him back and says, "Don't go." He says, "I have to." They kiss, and she says, "Whoever you are, thank you." I love that.
Yeah. It's a real, Western kind of scene of, the hero having to go out on his, one last ride or whatever.
Yeah. Because, again, my ultimate prediction is he and Evil Cooper are going to go over that waterfall together.
Sure,
but we'll see. Anyway, and he's going to put the ring on Evil Cooper as they're falling, and they're going to do a weird Monty Python animation. Anyway, but we will see. One other note is I thought the music in this scene, it's beautiful, it's an original cue, and it reminded me a lot of Mulholland Drive. and some of the the love theme between Naomi Watson and the other character in that movie. So kind of a similar level of like emotionality to it. But anyway, we then have a scene in the limo with Cooper and the Mitchums, and they're having a really good time.
Yeah,
we have these great shots of the POV. And Cooper has apparently told them everything, that he's a missing FBI agent. He needs to get to Twin Peaks. The Mitchums are trying to get this straight. And one of them says, Dougie, we love you, but we are not traditionally welcome at such places. Because they're going to go to the sheriff's station.
What I loved about that is the way the line was delivered is like, Dougie, we love you, but... And then there's a pause, and I was like, oh, they're not going to buy this ridiculous story.
Yeah.
And then that the reaction isn't like... What the fuck are you talking about? You're a missing FBI agent for 25 years and you have to go to some town called Twin Peaks. It's like... But we're not very popular with the law enforcement types.
Yeah. And then we get this great response where Cooper says, I read you 100%. Friends, that's about to change. I am witness to the fact that you both have hearts of gold.
And that is the most fucking Dale Cooper line ever written. That was, to me, like, even though it's not as touching in a lot of ways as like the Janie E scenes and stuff, or it's not as sort of like mic drop as the like I am the FBI line, that was the like... That is, like, no other character in the history of fiction would ever say a line like that other than Dale Cooper.
You're so right. You're absolutely right. And it's something I love about the whole Mitchum Brothers arc, which is that we're introduced to them as, like, these brutal gangsters, kind of. If weird gangsters. Again, they're part of, like, the Quentin Tarantino riff, but now they've completely diverted from that, and it's that... Okay, they were actually pretty good guys all along.
They're just in a rough business, you know.
Yeah,
they got screwed over on the whole insurance deal that Dougie helped them out on. You know, they had reason to be angry. They were out like $30 million or something.
And now that they've made this great friend, it's like they've risen to the occasion and become good people. It's a really fun element of this story. I'm interested to see if we do anything more with I keep calling them the pink ladies, the three women who are always with them. But it's very interesting. I mean, they're in this. The last scene of this is they're all in the limo smiling, and everyone's friends, and I love it. The legend of Dougie Jones lives on.
Yeah.
All right. Then we go to the Roadhouse, and they are proud to welcome Edward Louis Severson, who is the birth name of Eddie Vedder.
Yeah.
So that's who's playing here. A guy with a guitar and a cowboy hat. And it's a great performance. It's a great song. And as it's playing, especially because this is another one where the lyrics are so perfect. Because the intro lines to each verse are a little different. And there are things like, I am, who I was, I will never be again. Who I was, that will never come again. Who I could have been, I will never have the chance. All these things that make me think of Cooper and identity and him leaving these things behind. And as this was playing, I started kind of wrapping up my notes, and I just said, what a perfect fucking episode this was. And then it kept going, and there was no credits. And I'm like, we're not done? And I look at the time, it's like, 7 minutes left. Okay, how is this going to end? Because effectively that is the end of the episode, but we have an epilogue.
Yes. And we have a setup for the next for the finale.
And that is Audrey and Charlie have finally arrived at the Roadhouse.
They have exited their weird, like, one-man play set or whatever they're on.
Yep. And one of the things I noted is, wow, by the time Audrey actually got out of that house, her son was fucking dead. Which is one way to look at it, you know? But yeah, they toast. Charlie goes, here's to us, Audrey. She goes, here's to Billy, whoever the fuck that was.
Yeah.
And then the guy gets up, the MC at the Roadhouse gets up and says, ladies and gentlemen, Audrey's dance. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Because everyone on the floor moves to the side, and they're all leaving room for a very stunned Audrey. And then I didn't realize that this really had not played yet on Twin Peaks: The Return. The Audrey's dance theme begins playing right from the original soundtrack, same recording. And Audrey just closes her eyes, begins swaying to it like she's being taken over. And then she's out on the floor. We have these pink spotlights all around, and then a big light on her. And she's doing this even slower, weirder, sort of disembodied version of the dance from 25 years ago. And it goes on for a long time. Lynch even uses a bunch of little jump cuts to illustrate it, which is very rare in this series.
Yeah.
That he does it with effect sometimes, but like for an actual scene with continuity like this, he doesn't usually just jump cut within an action.
Yeah. There's lots of like shots where you can see all the people in the background that I found incredibly disturbing.
Yes.
Like they're just standing there. Like they look like the crowd in like a basketball video game or something. Just standing there totally stone-faced. It looks like half of them are clones of the other half. And you're like, what the fuck fuck are these people?
And you notice eventually, I don't know if they're doing it the whole time, but eventually they're all swaying slowly together. It's very eerie. And then out of nowhere, someone yells, "Monique, Monique, that's my wife, asshole," and starts a fight.
Yeah,
and Audrey
throws like a bottle.
Yep, and Audrey runs over to Charlie, says, "Get me out of here." And then hard cut, she's looking in a mirror at herself in a white room. She's wearing white clothing and says, "What?" Cut to black on harsh, strong, hard electrical sounds. And then credits roll over a shot of the band playing the song, but all the video and audio is reversed.
Yeah, like it's in the red room.
Wow.
Yeah.
My last note here was, Lynch knows how to set up a fucking finale.
Yeah, and then also it's like, right, Lynch is the like master filmmaker at dream sequences, because that moment of the like, and now Audrey's dance and all the people move, it's like, I mean, that is like every social anxiety nightmare ever, of just like that's the you showed up to school without your pants on thing of like, wait, what do you mean I have to dance by myself? Except for then Audrey just like sort of is absorbed into this weird dream logic, but all the people there just like move aside. And I found something like really, there's something strangely disturbing about this like revelation of like, oh, this has all been some weird dream, like her side of the story. Because also, if you like go back earlier to the Diane stuff, when Diane was having that breakdown saying like, I'm not me, that made me think of the Audrey scenes where she's having these weird disembodied experiences of like, when I'm with you, Charlie, I don't feel like myself anymore. And so like, I think that sort of keys you into, oh, whatever happened to Diane has also probably happened to Audrey at some point. And then it seems like that is very much so where this is going.
It's terrifying. I mean, we talked about this last week with the Audrey scenes, that we were both pretty sure this was not real. This was some kind of red room or dream or vision.
It took place in some weird time. It felt so disconnected from everything else. Because
the show moves with a pretty clear continuity of time.
Yeah.
And that was so disconnected from it all. And that's because it's not real or something.
Yeah.
Or I think everything is real to David Lynch. It's not on the same plane of reality as everything else.
Exactly.
Is probably the fairer way to say it. And now, but to the way he plays that hand here is still so shocking and unexpected.
Yeah.
And, Audrey could be in a mental hospital. She could be in the Red Room. She could be in a different plane of existence. It's terrifying.
I mean, it's the middle of season 6 of Doctor Who.
Basically,
Good Man Goes to War.
It's actually, I've been trying to remember, like, what specific shot from what show is this reminding me of? And you're right, it's the end of Good Man Goes to War.
Yes.
Or beginning of that, yeah.
Yeah, it's season 6 of Doctor Who.
Yeah, so
we're going to act, unfortunately, we're going to have an extremely disappointing finale if we're following that track, but...
No, I think we're going to have a really good finale, Sean.
Yeah, that's where I would place my bets for sure. It would be very weird if somehow that's the one episode that is bad as the last one. I would not expect.
I mean, I am excited. I'm glad there's no Game of Thrones next week, so I can just focus on Twin Peaks.
Yeah, instead of Game of Thrones, you're getting 2 Twin Peaks.
That's way better.
Yeah.
And I like Game of Thrones, even if this was a little season. So... next week, Sean, it's it. I think that will probably be the brunt of our podcast next week. Will be Twin Peaks wrap-up.
Yeah.
We'll see. There's luckily... the big game release next week is Destiny, but we will not have played it probably by the time we record,
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe we'll do something special and figure that out. But yeah. So next week will be mostly Twin Peaks. I don't even want to do any speculation. We've broken it down. I just want to see it and absorb it and talk about it with you. The last thing I do want to say, just to think about this over the next week. Next week might be the last thing David Lynch ever releases in filmed material. And I think it is worth celebrating this moment. And I'm not trying to be morbid or anything. It's just, he's in his 70s. He went 10 years, 12 years actually, without releasing a movie last time. And he might just be done, And the next 2 hours of this could be the last thing he does in his film career. And if so... what a fucking swan song it will probably be.
Yeah.
But I think it is worth celebrating that moment, that we might all be communally watching the end of this man's wonderful, amazing film career. I hope he lives another 30 fucking years painting and with his family. I'm just saying it could be, and I want to keep that in mind, because a lot of Twin Peaks The Return has had a sense of reflexiveness and finality to it.
Absolutely.
And I'm very curious to see what bow he puts on all of this. because this has been, I think, the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen on TV.
Yeah, it has been a long, strange journey. Like, it has made me rethink a lot of stuff about, like, structural elements of episodic storytelling and exceptionalism in that space and what can be done in that space in 18 one-hour long episodes. And it's, I think it's like a transformative work for that medium of television, which is something that we have been in this weird... I really don't like the term for, like, kind of almost aesthetic reasons, but we've been in the peak TV era or whatever for a while now, but it feels like Twin Peaks: The Return is sort of saying, like, no, this is what... If you want us to talk about peak TV, like, it's not about, like, cheap cliffhangers and, like, big character deaths on social media that, like, blow up. It is
peak
about...
TV, technically, as it was coined by John Landgraf, refers to the amount of television.
Sure.
Not necessarily the quality of it. Although I think they intersect because we are in this interesting golden age where TV storytelling has gotten so great and there's more good TV than anyone can possibly consume. But I do take your point, and I agree with it, that this feels like the next evolution that we've been waiting for.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing we've been building to for a while, I think. I mean, like, it's also feels very appropriate that I'm rewatching or / watching Breaking Bad all the way through for the first time, which was one of those shows in that, like sort of like after Sopranos, I feel like Breaking Bad was one of those big ones that felt like, oh, right, like, TV can do these, like, big dramatic character stories, and it's not necessarily like episodic one-off things over and over again, which is never what TV actually was. That's the narrative people like to construct about this sort of, like, evolution of TV shows these days. But it feels like this is a step beyond what those kinds of shows have been doing for me.
Well, I mean, it's a bookend because 26 years ago, Twin Peaks 27 years ago, came on the air and was this revolutionary work. And it took a while for TV to catch up with that, but it sparked all these fires of, like, I think some of the cinematic qualities of TV really coming to the front, and it launched a bunch of directorial careers for TV directors. And, you know, then you get the moment of The Sopranos and the birth of, like, this model beyond network TV and the loosening of restraints. And we have this whole, you know, series of great, great, masterful TV shows that comes after that, like, you know, Deadwood and Mad Men and Breaking Bad and everything in that lineage. And then Twin Peaks comes back around at the time when I think some of the fire that it helped to start, it didn't start it on its own, but helped to start, is blazing brightest.
Yeah.
And it comes back and re-revolutionizes everything. And that's an amazing thing, I think.
Yeah. So I'm tremendously excited to see what next week is going to bring, how you conclude this thing, and just what the fuck the ending of Twin Peaks: The Return is going to be. But I'm also even more excited in some ways about what, you know, the next 10, 15, 25 years after this is, of who is influenced and how they're influenced by this TV show, because I think it's going to be a big thing going forward.
Yep. So next week we'll talk Twin Peaks. We have Halo Let's Plays going up. We're going to have another Doctor Who middle of September. So lots of exciting stuff happening. We will see you guys next week. I'm so excited for more Twin Peaks.
Yes, I'm excited to move into the post-peak TV era, or as I will call it, the Twin Peak TV era.